Hello everyone and welcome to this video manual for the Teenage Engineering OPXY. It's a sequencer, synthesizer, sampler, incredibly powerful and deep device. This is a very comprehensive guide to the device and I've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. So I want to start off by saying this is a video manual, right? I'm going through what's in the manual. It very closely follows the structure of the OPXY manual. It's for people that either want to use it in addition to the manual itself or, learn better when they're hearing things like this. But because it follows it so closely, I have included these little section headings up here, which means that you can find the corresponding section of the manual if you want to go and have a look and see a bit more detail there. That said, there's a lot of additional material, a lot of my notes and thoughts about the device, and so hopefully it'll be useful even if you have a good knowledge of the manual itself. There's going to be chapter markers. Use it to revisit specific sections if you're wanting to go back to it later on. A couple of conventions that are worth mentioning. When you see an uppercase word like this, it's referring to a specific button. So in this case, it's record, which is this button. This is project, for example. You get the idea. Square brackets is a class of button. So this could be a key. So, one of the keys on the keyboard, a step in the sequencer. It could be any encoder, a generic type of key. I'll refer to specific encoders as encoder 1, encoder 2, encoder 3, and encoder 4. In the manual, they are dark gray, mid gray, light gray, and white. And as much as I like those names for them, it's not very convenient when I'm recording this. So that's one place that I deviate from the manual. Another convention from the manual is that these keys are going to be called accidentals, and these keys with the symbols on them. So the numbers are accidentals, and the ones with the symbols are the natural keys. If you see me referring to that, then that's what I'm meaning. Okay, let's get started. Here is a general overview of the hardware. It has a built-in speaker, which actually can get quite loud and has pretty decent bass response. There's this pitch bend strip down here. I don't know how well you can see that. You see it there. It has a built-in microphone. It's got a VU meter so you can see the levels. It has 4 ports, which I'm not going to show you here, which do things like MIDI, audio in and audio out, headphones with a microphone built in as well, so you can have audio coming in like this. USB for charging, your power switch over here. Lots of lovely buttons with this nice tactile clicky feel. These ones are velocity sensitive. These endless encoders and for parameters for synths and stuff, and then this encoder over here which has limits, which is for the volume. It's a 16-track sequencer. You can have a maximum of 64 steps per sequence. Those steps can actually last a very long time, so you can get quite long patterns in this. It's got 24 voice polyphony, a full stereo signal path. There's 8 synth engines. There's 3 sample-based engines, which can all be assigned to any one of these 8 instrument tracks. There is per track arpeggiators, or sort of players they're called, so they can do things like chords, for example, or hold notes, or arpeggiate. There's 2 FX tracks with the option of one of 6 FX that can be loaded up on each of them. You can feed the effects from FX1 into FX2. There's a master EQ, there's a saturator, there's a compressor, there's a limiter, there's punch-in effects and a tape looper, which are great for performance, so good performance features. There's a gyroscope as well, which you can use to control parameters, so you can use that for performance features. There's a song mode, MIDI in and out. It can be used as a standalone MIDI controller, 8 GB of internal storage. Yeah, lots and lots and lots of features. So the layout, it broadly has this structure. There's the mode buttons here, so you select what mode you're in, and the manual suggests that this kind of is the stages of making a track. So it starts with the instruments, then which are the 8 instrument tracks that you can sequence, and synthesizers and drum tracks, things like this. Then you have the aux track, which are things like the effects or the brain, which you can use to intelligently transpose your sequence. Punch-in effects, external MIDI, although you can load external MIDI onto these 8 instrument tracks as well. CV and gate, input, so you can have audio coming in here. You can also resample from the device. Tape loop, tape track, and the 2 FX ones. So they're all the instrument and the aux ones. Then you have an arranger, you make patterns, you can build up scenes of patterns. We're going to go into depth on all of this throughout the video. This is just a general overview. Then you've got the mixer, and that's got things like the EQ and the saturator and whatnot. So these are the mode buttons here. These ones are the modules. So when you're in, basically these are context sensitive buttons. So if you're in an instrument, then they generally go through things like the envelope, they go to the filter, the LFO, and the synth parameters themselves. But in different menus like project, they do different things. That's the module buttons. Then we've got the tracks. There, like I said, there's 8 tracks for instruments and there's 8 tracks for the aux elements as well. We've got the actual sequencer itself. So this is a 16-step sequencer, and the bar menu here, which you can use to control the sequence parameters, the length of the sequence, and some other things as well. Then there is the transport buttons, record, play, stop, and there's plus and minus for changing octave and some other things as well. Shift for lots of context sensitive menus. We've got the keyboard here, which is velocity sensitive. You also have the sampler. You have the project button here. You have tempo. You have com, and you have players. So whenever, these are the names that I'll be using when I'm referring to these things generally. That's the overall structure of the device. Now, we're going to start with a simple example of a workflow. I'm not going to do an in-depth explanation of everything. That's going to be coming, and I'll revisit these topics, so don't worry about the details so much. This is just to give you an idea of the workflow and what it's like to work with the device itself. So let's start and make a project. So if we press this project button, we can hold module button 1, M1, and we'll make a new track. We can rename it. Let's call it, we can control the cursor with encoder 1, we'll change the cursor position, and then we can select the character with encoder 2, and we're going to call it P0. And I'm going to delete out the other characters here. Now, OK has been blanked out, and the reason for that is I already have a project called P0. So let's so it won't let you do that. It's not particularly intuitive. It doesn't tell you that you might forget, for example, but I've changed it to P1, and now we can do that. So we have this new track. By default, on the instrument tracks here, we have a whole bunch of default engines loaded up. But before we start messing with them, let's set the tempo. Let's change it to 106. And in fact, if I hold Shift, I can do some fine adjustments of this 106.2. But then we've got swing type, or groove type, sorry, and the groove amount. And this is a combination of swing and some modifications to the way the sequence is played. I'll come back to that later. Metronome controls. Right, so we can make it louder, we can make it quieter, we can turn it on and off by clicking down on the encoder. Okay, so I'm going to sequence, so I don't really need this on just now. Let's go and start actually sequencing something in. So we can go to Instruments, I'll go to track 1 here, which has got the drum engine loaded up, which enables you to have 24 samples loaded onto these. You can make an empty one and sample into each of these if you like, with internal or through USB, through your headset, or actually internally resample. More on all of that later. Let's pick a kick first. I'm going to choose this one here, and then I'm going to put it on, let's do 4 on the floor, right? Okay. So if I want to, now I want to put a snare, and I'm going to put it on beats 1 and 4. If I press the snare button and then I tap record, it'll show only the snare on it. So we're still on the same instrument track, but if I hold the snare, tap record, then we can put it down just on these notes here, right? Now we watch, and we can see what we've got on any step by just holding it down. So you can see here I've got the snare and the snare and the kick drum on this step, but just the kick drum on this one. Okay, so we've got a kick and a snare. Now we want to add some hi-hat. So here's a nice hi-hat here. We just hold the hi-hat down again, press record, and then we're going to do 16th note hi-hats. Okay, great. Then next thing that we want to do is we're going to use a relatively advanced sequencer function called step components. We hold Shift to do that, and we press any step we like on the sequencer to add it. And then we're going to say, okay, we're going to use this one, which is multiply, which is going to sort of do a retrigger type effect. So you can get a kind of ratchet. It's going to divide it into 2 just now, but these different options, you can press the number buttons once you've got it selected and flashing like this, and choose different options. I'm going to do 3 triggers. Okay, great. So now we've done step components, and we've got a basic little drum loop sorted there. Next, I'm going to go to the bass track. So I'm going to go to track 3. So by default, it's got the Prism engine loaded, and it's good for bass as well as other things as well. And there's a range of parameters you can modify. You can change the ratio. We're going to keep it there. Detune it, make a more of a stereo effect. I'll keep it in the center a bit more for this though. So lots of ways you can modify this. let's make a little basic, something like this. Okay, so this time we're going to live record, and to do that we're going to hold record and press play, and when this is flashing red over here, it's ready for us to live record. Okay, so now we've got a little bass line there. Alternatively, if we're playing, if we want to go into record mode, we can either hold down record and then enter our notes and then release it and it'll turn off record, or do record plus play and it'll go back into sort of the held record mode. If we do play again, it'll get out of that. Okay, so now we have our little bass line and we've done some live recording. The bar menu. Now let's see, this time we're going to do some chords. We're going to go to track 7 and I'm going to turn down the velocity sensitivity on this. So here is the instrument menu. If we press shift and go into this, we can get lots of different settings. More on all of those later. I'm going to select velocity sensitivity and I'm going to turn it right down. Right, so let's record some chords. Now I'm going to put this chord on here. So if I hold this down and then I can press all the notes I want, so this is recorded onto this step now, but it's not going to last for the full bar, right? So we can extend this, we hold this down. Okay, and we're going to adjust the envelope for this, so the module buttons on this, on the instrument, these ones are the individual synth engine parameters, but these ones are usually the same. So it's the envelope, or there's two envelopes, one for the amp and one for the filter. There is the filter and there is an LFO. So I'm going to change the envelope a little bit. I'm going to remove a little bit of the attack and remove a little bit of the release. Okay, so this is a little bit boring just now because we just got one chord, right? So maybe we want to add another, let's add another 16 steps, and we can do that by holding this bar menu, and if we press plus, then we'll get a new page and we can press bar to switch between the pages. So what were we doing this? So I might do that and then make it last for the full thing again. Okay, so now we've got some chords. Now an additional note is that if you want to copy the steps instead of just making a new empty one, so if I do plus like I said before, we go to 3, then it's completely empty. If I press bar and minus, I can get rid of that one. And if I want to copy the previous one, then, and we do shift and plus, then we can see there that this is the chord from, so that's 2, and then it'll be back to the first one for 3, then back to 3. So we can do this and copy it over, so that's a useful feature. Next, we're going to do some parameter locking. I'm going to do a little simple melody here. So I'm going to go to track 5. So something like this. Something like that. Right, so let's arm for recording. And try again. So we can get rid of the steps like this if we want. You could even just edit notes on particular steps. But let's go. Okay, so I'm happy enough with that. A little bit repetitive, but it's fine for this example. Now we're going to do something called parameter locking. Let's see if we can change this up a little bit. We can pick particular steps, or actually live record changes to various different encoders here. So if we've got it playing here, we can hold record and change an encoder and it will record the movement that we have. I'm going to go onto the mixer track here and I'm going to change the delay. And then I'm going to record me changing it. Okay, so it's added a little bit of movement for it. So you can also remove notes. If you hold the bar button down, you can clear the parameter lock. If you don't like the parameter lock anymore, you can clear it. And you can clear everything, notes and parameter locks, or just notes, by pressing these buttons here. Also, you can clear everything off of the pattern by holding record and then pressing stop. And if that fills up to the top, it'll get rid of everything. But we don't want to do that just now. So let's move in. Now, we can do some live modification. So we could transpose this using the brain. And we could sequence that, the transposition there. We can also, it's auto-detected that we're in C-sharp Dorian here. This is what it thinks that we're doing, which is good. This is the notes that I was playing. But we can also manually set this in the brain as well by going down here. The other thing we can do, we could mix it up a bit using punch-in effects. This is on the aux track again. If it's red up here, you've got aux track selected. If it's white, then you've got the instrument tracks. So we've got our aux track selected here with the punch-in effects. And this octave will affect the synth and sample-based, sort of the melodic engines, and this one will affect the drums. So you can get some really interesting effects. But we can also record these. We can step sequence them. So let's say that we want this one, which is like a little fill, and we can do that just for this last part here. So because that was the last thing I pressed, as soon as I press a button up here, it will remember where I am, and it'll put this on here. So now we've got a little fill from our punch-in effects. And if we want to, you can see that the delay is going on. If you want to get rid of that delay, press stop twice, and super panic, it'll cut the level straight away. So punch-in effects are great fun. You can also, some of them are gyroscope sensitive, so you can change the effect by tilting the device, and it's tons of fun to mess around with these. Okay, so that's a little example of the workflow. We've got a little basic pattern here, and I can explain some of the in more detail some of the features of the instrument. So the OPXY is built around a sequence-based workflow. It's got a very, very powerful and deep sequencer. I'm going to tell you, you've seen in the workflow example how you use it basically, but I'm going to go into a little bit of depth here. Notes can be step sequenced as I showed you, or can be live recorded. We're going to start off just going in detail over step sequencing something. I'm going to go to this track here. Let's see, we can do some stab. Something like this. Okay, say that we want to add a chord to one of these steps. We can hold it down the step, right? And we can put it down like this. Now, it will use the velocity that you've played this with, right? So if you want it, let's mute everything just now. Shortcut for muting things, you hold the instruments, all the lights show you which ones are currently on. Let's take these all off for now. Very quiet, right? So let's turn them off, right? On the step so we can edit notes in it. So now it's louder, right? So the velocity you press when you're on a step is what will be used. And again, same is true if you're live recording. So this is really nice. You can, especially for sequencing drums, right? You can be quite particular about the velocity. If you don't want that, you can turn the velocity sensitivity off, or you can use a step component, this one here, I'll talk about it in a little bit, to manually set the velocity. So if you want to extend the note, you hold down the step and then you press out to extend it. So this is extended for the first 4 steps, the first 8 steps, etc., right? So you can see the hairdryer blowing for longer there. This engine is hard sync. I'll come back and tell you all about the different engines in a little bit. So you can also nudge the micro timing of the note. If you hold this down and you press plus or minus, then it will nudge the micro timing. So we don't have anything. Let's turn the drums back on so you can hear it. Now, at the moment, nothing is really happening. And the reason for that is that we've got quantization on. So if we want to hear that effect, we want to turn the quantization down. So if we do this, so you hear how there's a delay there, and we can make it even more pronounced. So it sounds like it's going on this step. And that's because we've got this nudge effect here. So again, you can do the same in reverse if you want to make it come in early. So you can adjust the micro timing in all sorts of different ways. As I showed you before, if you want to see what notes are on a step, you can hold it, you can see them there. And if you want to see on the whole track where those notes are, so for example, let's say that I'm going to go this one here again, and then I'm going to do a different chord here. It's a little bit quiet. So you can hold a particular note and then press record and see what steps it's on. So this is on everything. Let's check this one. It's only on this step here, right? So you can use this to clear the sequencer and just input a specific note, which is very useful. If you want to do a parameter lock like I showed you before, you can live record it and hold record whilst it's going and change it, but you can also do it here. So let's see what happens if we, let's say we're going to put the sub oscillator up really high on this one, just for that step. Now watch the number up here up at the top that says sub, it says 99. So you see how it's going right the way up. So you can do this. Now you need to have a note on the step in order to do a parameter lock, or at least you did in 1.0.13. Let's just see, double check that that's definitely the case. Yeah, you do. So you need to have a note in order to parameter lock like that. You do not if you're live recording it. So that's something that's worth noting. So that's the step sequencer. That's one way to record it. The other one is live recording, right? So let's get rid of those notes now, right? And let's get ready. We'll arm for recording like this, and then we're going to go. Now, I've changed the octave. It's worth noting how to do this. You do it like that, with plus and minus to change the octave of the keyboard. So there we've live recorded something in. We can modify it live if we hold record like this. So let's get ready for another chord. So there we go. And of course we can add the quantization back on, because you can hear my sloppy playing there. But we put the quantization back up. And we can turn it off. We can get rid of it like this. As I mentioned before, you can also, so that's with holding record, but you can press record plus play in order to keep it on record mode. Okay, so this is the live recording. Let's go into step recording. So I'll show you another interesting one. Let's hold record and stop to clear the sequence and all the parameter locks as well. Let's go. What are we going to do? We're going to go. Now, in this mode, what you do is you hold down, whilst the sequencer is not playing, you hold down record, and then you press whatever you want. So there we go, I've step recorded this. So what happens is when you're holding the record, as soon as you play something, I'll move to the next step. If you already have something there, like if I do this again, let's say that I want to change it to just this, you'll see that what's happened, it's recorded over that, right? Now, if you're in this mode, if you don't want it to be on this step, you can use plus and minus to skip it. So you could, let's clear again one more time, and let's go, and then skip, and then maybe we want to. Okay, so this is the step recording mode. It's quite nice to quickly put something down. Okay, so now we've got a little pattern here. I said that you can extend your sequence, and actually there's a lot of different ways you can extend the sequence. The first protocol is increasing the amount of time that each step takes. So for this, let's go back and let's copy this one down. So I hold a step and it's copied the note. And if I put this like this, now we've got this really rapid, right? Now, if I press bar, I can change this track scale. Now this multiplies the amount of time a single step takes. So at the moment it's on 1, so it's the default amount of time based on the tempo, right? If we say track scale of 2, it'll take twice as long to do one step. So you see? And this goes all the way up, right? So track scale of 3. So you can get, syncopation here, right? Because this is running at a different time than, it's not divisible by the drum track, for example. So it's going in and out of phase. And you can do this all sorts of ways. So you can do it with 7 as well. So it's really going to go out of phase, which is fun. You can get polyrhythms and other things like this. You can also have track scale 8 up to 16. So with a track scale of 16, each step takes full 16 steps for one step, and that you've got 16 steps, each taking the length of 16 steps, so it's 16 times 16, and you've got 4 pages like that, which works out as the equivalent of 1064 steps long. So you can make really, really long sequences by using the track scale. Okay, so that's the first place to go, especially if you're doing chords or something like this. Let's quickly go. We've got 2 pages here, right? page 1, page 2. Let's quickly change this and use track scale instead, because for this, it's actually a bit more useful. So I've copied this here. I'm going to go to 1. I'm going to put it on here, and I'm going to make it go this length and this length. Now, and I need to unmute this. So you see, it's going, it's going very quickly at the moment, but let's take off that second bar. So we're down to 1 bar. It's too fast at the moment though, we want it to be slower than that. So we can hold this down and say track scale of 2, and now we've got the same as what we had before, when we had 2 bars, except now we're using track scale to affect this. And this is really nice for chords because you can kind of see all the chords on one set of 16 steps. So it's a nice feature. You can also set the length of this sequence. So you don't need to use all 16 steps. You can say, okay, well, I only want it to last for 12 steps, so I'm going to go up to here. Now, if I play, and let's stop this and change the track scale back to 1. Now watch, it didn't ever go all the way to these steps. These never get played. It just repeats back here. So this is a really nice way to get things like polyrhythms, where you got things going in and out of phase. It can lead to some really interesting effects with this. But let's put it back the way it was before. The other way that you can send it is you can hold bar and you can press plus, or you can press shift and plus will copy. So you can see here I've got 2 identical copies here, and then I could maybe remove some of the notes so you can see where we are. So let's change the scale back down to 1. So this is the first bar. And we could add another one, and if we just use plus by itself, it'll be empty. So we'll see this, that's bar 1, bar 2, and bar 3. And again, you can do the same with bar 4 as well. And that you can combine multiple bars with the track scale as well to get these very long patterns. You can switch, when the sequencer is not running, you can use bar just to switch between the different pages, so you can program it. And when it is running, by default, it will follow the playhead, but if you press the bar button, it'll stay on that page. So it means you can play or program whilst the sequencer is running. You see, it's just staying on that page. So there's on the bar menu, let's get rid of this last one. The bar menu has more than just the adding bars, though. It has these other options here, which correspond to encoder 1, 2, 3, and 4. So quantization I've already shown you earlier, but of course if you turn off quantization, then you can basically play in between these steps. You can also do it by adjusting the micro timing, like I showed you before. Hold 1 down and change the micro timing like this, but you can also just play it loose and then turn off the quantization, and you'll get the same or a similar type of effect. And sometimes that's needed in order to get particular feeling, a particular groove. The second encoder, this grey one here, is the length encoder. Now, this is the length of the gate, so how long the note is held down for. So you can see it here. Now, I've programmed all of these in. If you live record it, that gate is set by when you release the notes. But if you program it in, you can set this. So let's make it shorter here. Now, basically, the way that this synth engine is, that when it has the short gate like this, then you get this funny buzzy effect, which is nice. And of course, we can make it longer, the length, and then it's held down for longer. So the actual trig is lasting for longer, the gate's lasting for longer. The other thing is per track groove. So this is swing and some other features, but you can do it per track. So you can put some of them out and the other ones not. So you can have, out of your 8 tracks, you can add groove onto them. And the last one is this smoothing for the parameter lock. Let's try and get a nice example of this where it's stepping. Let's take off this next bar. So we've just got 1 bar, and then I'm going to record it and I'm going to change this sub oscillator and then watch the value here as it goes. So, right, I'm going to start changing. Now, you see how it's just bouncing around to specific values, which is fine for this, but sometimes you don't want that kind of effect. And what you can do is you can add some smoothing using this, and you'll see that it's varying in between now. It's not bouncing around specific values, it's smoothly changing between them. So that can be really nice for certain effects. So you can also, on the bar menu, you can clear the notes. So we can clear the parameter lock, for example, here, and now it's gone. You can clear the notes, and then the notes will be gone, or clear everything, parameters and the note. And like I said, there's a shortcut of record plus stop, which will also do the same thing as clearing everything. Okay, so some advice on the sequencer. The sequencer is great, it's very powerful. There's lots of ways to do the same thing to get the same result, and I really like this, right? That you can use the track scale, or you can use multiple bars. I used the OPZ a lot, which only had the track scale, so I got used to doing things like that. And there's certain things it's just more convenient for, but there's no doubt that having particular bars and being able to tweak and play around with that is very useful, especially when you combine it with something like track scale of a half. So number 10 is, or 0, sorry, is track scale of a half, which means that you'll get one of these will only last for 8 steps. So this is really nice. So you can get this fine resolution. So you could have 2 bars, each lasting for 8 steps, and then you could have like intricate little drum fills and stuff like this all programmed in. So it is nice to have this, but there's some things that are just easier by using track scale or the other way around. So when you're thinking about it, think about the kind of resolution that you need. Do you need to have resolution where you can get in between the notes? Do you need, or can you have it where, you know, it's got 8 times track scale and you just need to program in some chords, for example, or 16 times, and you might have all of them filled up with chords that are lasting for, you know, 1 full bar. Sometimes you need to use free play without quantization to get certain effects, right? So turn off the quantization. If it's not falling where you want it to, then turn off quantization and then try something, and that will help you get the timing. Play around the swing options. I'm going to come back to these. I've not shown you them yet, but we're going to come back to these. It's not just swing, they're called groove, and they can really change your pattern in a lot of ways. So if we do this, let's just do one and turn up the swing. So you can hear how it's changing the feel of that. But look, there's some cool options here like wobble. And you can do that per track in the bar menu, right? So you can get some very different effects if you click down on this encoder here, which sets the swing amount or the groove amount, then it'll reset it back to the position at the beginning. I'll come back and talk about this in a wee bit. Also, step components, which you can use. I showed this right at the beginning. It can be easier to get certain effects or to program particular things in using the step components. They're really powerful, and I'm going to talk about those now in a lot of detail. So step components. Step components are a sequencer feature that enables you to alter how a sequence is played, how a trig on the sequence is played. And they can change things like note probabilities. You can randomly transpose notes. You can automate things like pitch bend or portamento changes. You can desync the sequencer. You can run the sequencer backwards. You can do all sorts of things. They're very, very powerful, and they're a really nice feature of the sequencer in the OPXY and the OPZ where they originally came from. So if you want to add step component to something, you hold shift. You see that these lights dimmed. Hopefully you can see that. It's quite difficult to see, but when they're dimmed, it means there's not a step component on it. And if we want to put a step component on something, we can select as many steps as we like in order to put the step component, and then we press one of these natural buttons here, the ones with the symbols, to add the different step components. Then once you've got it added, you select different options using these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 10. If you, so that's how you can add one on. You can add one or multiple or whatnot, and you can add multiple step components, as many as you like. I've not seen a limit to this, so that's really nice. So let's run through the step components and show you how they work. Now, I'm going to simplify this, this pattern a little bit, and I'm going to do, so actually I'll just turn this off just now, and I'm going to, and then so that we can, nope. Nope, that's not right. So let's change this one to this one here, and the last one. So let's move it. And we're going to turn down the velocity sensitivity a little bit because it's a little bit, I'm not quite as delicate as I should be on this. Oops, I'm holding a shift, which is why it's not changing. Okay, so we're back here. Now, I can show you. So you can hear this. Let's say this one, we're going to add a step component to this one. So we hold shift, we press that, it's flashing now, and I'm going to try the pulse first. And what this is going to do is repeat this 4 times. Repeat the whole step 4 times. Now watch. So you see it stayed on that and triggered it 4 times, and it's put the sequencer out of sync now. Right, so we can do this. We can do this basically to mess up the timing of the sequence. You can do this with both pulse and hold as well. So if we do this again, let's say turn off the pulse, and put on hold, and we're going to hold it for 4 steps. Okay, they have similar options as well. If we pick one, then we can repeat, for example, with pulse twice, or we can hold for 1 step, sorry, or 2 steps, or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So again, let's just... So it repeats this step, the whole step, 9 times. So it puts this playhead out of sync with the global playhead, which is pretty cool. And there's a way to sync it back up, which I'll show you in a little second. So the last option as well is that you can say, okay, well, you can repeat it a random number of times. Right, and you can combine these together as much as you like, but it's really nice for putting it out of phase over and over again, like nudging it out of phase. Now, if you want to get it back in sync, you can use this step component called jump. I'm going to come in a lot more detail later on, but it's kind of useful to show it here. I'm going to pick this empty step. I'm going to put a step component on here, and this is going to be jump, and it's this one here, which is number 9, aligned to track position. Now, watch what happens. So that we know what's going on here, let's say 6. It's going to repeat it 6 times. Now watch. Now when it hit this one, it jumped forward 6 steps, so it's now aligned back in. And you hear how it's not going out of phase anymore? If we turn this one off again, sorry, this one off again, now it's going out of phase again, right? So this is a nice trick that you can use. You can have this happening conditionally, and eventually, or at particular patterns, everything will sync back up and then it will start on. So this is the pulse and the hold step components. They're very cool. The next one is multiply, which is the one I used in the first instance. Now let's replace this with multiply, and you'll see the difference with them. I'm going to repeat it 4 times. Now you see that what's happened there, it's re-triggered it 4 times on the step. So the timing of the step stays the same, it just re-triggers it and equally divides that step up and re-triggers over it. So this is really nice to get little fills and little flourishes like that. It also, the timing of it depends on the scale of the track, right? So if we set the scale to 2, you'll notice, so it's slower this time if we set it to 4. So it's slower, right? So it evenly divides the amount of time that step has and re-triggers whatever's on this that many times. So you can, again, the options are 1 through to 9 or a random number of trigs. So you can hear it re-triggering lots of different times. So that's multiply, very useful one. The next one is velocity. Now we're going to go to track 2. And we're going to demonstrate this with a drum hi-hat here. This is quite useful to see. So what I can do now you can see there's velocity sensitivity on this. So if I press it gently, it's louder or quieter. But say that I want to have particular defined velocities. So what I can do here, let's make sure this is, okay, I've muted the other ones. And let's say that, so this is unmuted now. So again, I can turn this on and off. So if I play, there's nothing. I've also muted this as well. So I've turned off this punching effect. Let's program this in. Now I'm using all different velocities, right? And let's make sure that we're not muted, sorry. So there we go. You can hear the hi-hats there, but you can hear that there's all different velocities on them. But we can set these, let's say, so that the on the beat is always at maximum velocity. So this is the velocity step component, and we say that we want it at 127, which is the maximum. So you can hear on the beat, it's louder. And we could say, for example, with these ones, well, we don't want them to have, we want them to have a random velocity. We don't want them to be the same all the time. We get kind of a more natural feeling. So if we use the last one, 0 here, then it'll be random for those other ones. So there's some that are going to be louder and some that are quieter. It's worth pointing out as well that this is the velocity step component is based on the velocity sensitivity in your instrument menu. So again, to get the instrument menu, make sure you're press the instrument button, you're on whatever track you want to go in, and you press shift and it's the instrument menu. And one of the options is velocity sensitivity, and it respects this, right? So if I turn this down and make it velocity insensitive, right? So all exactly the same. Now it's respecting the velocity sensitivity, right? So it's worth noting. If you're not noticing that, then that's probably why. So that is the velocity one, and you can use it with external devices as well, and it's useful for drums like this. Now let's mute this track and then put back the other ones again, and go back to track 6. Okay, the next is ramp up and ramp down. So we hold shift and let's click this, and we're going to select this ramp step component here. And let's say that it's going to ramp 5 steps over 1 octave. So the first time around it's the same. So you hear how the first time around is the same as it was. Second time around it's ramping up and up. So every time it goes round, it goes up. The same is true, you can go ramp down as well. We could say 5 over 1 step. So it starts high, and then it goes down, and it goes down again. And we can do this over 3 octaves, for example. So this will be very obvious. So it starts very high, and the interesting thing is that this respects the scale that's set in the brain. So if we go to here, it's saying C# Dorian, and it's using this to intelligently transpose the notes here. That's how it knows what's going on, and it's moving within the scale. It's not just picking random notes or just transposing down by a set amount. It's preserving the intervals and things like this. Yeah, so these are the options that you can have. Let's do this, and you can see that there's 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps, and 6 steps over 1 octave, and then the same over 3 octaves. So it's a nice effect, and I'll show you a little trick at the end of the section using this, which you can get quite an interesting effect using the ramp step component. The next one I want to mention is the random step component. This might be easier to hear with something that is a single note. So let's mute this track, hold an instrument, press the track you want to mute, and we're going to unmute. Let's say we're going to unmute this one here, which is Epiano. And I'm going to turn down the velocity sensitivity just so that I don't need to input the notes too hard. Okay, so let's say that we're going to, this time we're going to go, let's say, no, let's keep in the scale. So now, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to pick some of these notes to randomly transpose. So you'll be able to hear them going, randomly changing. We're going to pick these 2 here. We pick random. And then what it's going to do is it randomly transposes within exactly similar to the ramp with the similar kind of ranges. It'll randomly transpose up to 5 steps in 1 octave. So watch this. So you hear how it's changing, but it's staying within the scale. So it's, quite musical still. And we could do the whole final section. We could say, okay, do it normally to start with and then randomly transpose it. We can have big steps here. So the random, it can generate some really nice effects. And like I said, it respects the scale, and it's the same options as ramp up and ramp down. Okay, so that is random. The next one is Portamento, and again, this is a nice one to see here. Let's get rid of some of these notes. So there's no Portamento on this at the moment. We can turn Portamento on, and we can say this. So if we go into the envelope menu, press Shift, we can turn Portamento on. I'm going to go through all these options in a little bit, but we can turn Portamento on like this. And what we can do is we can actually use step components to change that. So if we say, let's go something maybe slightly more musical than that, and then we'll go up to here, and we need to unmute this. So here we've got this Portamento here, but we can use, we can change the Portamento. We can say the Portamento step component here, we're going to change it so that it's got maybe 90% Portamento here, or maybe let's have a low amount, 10% Portamento here, and then higher Portamento there. So you see, so by this one, the Portamento is lower, and we can actually see it if we go into this menu. You see it going down and up. So we can use step components to change the Portamento. You can actually get some really interesting effects. And of course, we've got random here as well. So you can get some pretty wacky sounding things with this, which is fun. Let's turn off the Portamento just now. Next one is similar, but applies pitch bend instead of Portamento. So again, inside this the envelope menu, we've got pitch bend options here. So we need to be aware of these and have these steps, but you can, let's turn off the Portamento so you can hear it a bit better. So hopefully you can hear that there. Let's go into this one. So you can hear that there. And in this track, we're going to unmute this track. We're going to mute that one. So there's our little synth line. Let's change the pitch bend on this step here. We're going to click bend, and then there's lots of different options. They actually have different effects on them. I'm going to run the sequencer and then change the option. So that's the first one. And then up, down, then bump down, and bump. You hear that it like lasts past that with the fade up. And then there's random as well, which does a random little flourish. And there's two options for random, which sounds quite good, this one. So again, it automates the pitch bend. And again, you can send this out using external tracks. You can send this to external gear to do pitch bend on another device as well. So this is new to the OPXY. It wasn't in the OPZ. Most of the step components are the same between them, although there's slight tweaks to behavior. The next one is transpose, and this is really a really interesting one. This will transpose a note by a fixed interval, and it respects the scale that's been set in the brain. It's kind of much more controllable than random, which is randomly transposing in the scale. So we can say with this one, let's just mute this track and put this one back on. So we can say this note, we're going to transpose it, and the default option is we're going to transpose it up a fifth. So it's currently, actually, yeah. So if we have to change octave here. So this is this note here, and if we up a fifth is, so it should transpose up to this note here. And do we have this on? Yes, we do, right. So it's transposed up a fifth. And if we do this again, we can do other intervals up an octave, a third. We can chromatically up one semitone or down a semitone, and quantize. There's some other options here which are a little bit interesting. Let me show you the first couple of options as well, because they're interesting. You can ignore the chord progression using these, and this is the chord progression from the brain track. You can also, there's this transpose only option, and there's another couple of odd ones at the end which are quantize. I'll show you the ignored chord progression one here first. So to start with, let's just make sure it doesn't have anything on. So now if I go into brain while that's running, and like I showed you before, I can transpose it. Right, so that's the normal one there. Now if I go back in here and I say this one, I want it to ignore, just as for this single step, I want it to ignore the chord progression, right? So let's go back to the brain and let's play. Okay, and if I transpose, so that's transposed, but that hasn't. So you can keep elements using this step component, which ignoring the transpose, it'll keep particular elements of your melody the same, which can be very useful actually. The other thing that you can do with this, let's turn this one off for now again so that I don't forget that I've got it on. Let's go back to this track here, because this is the easiest way to show it. If I go and we'll mute this one and turn this one, clear this, and we're going to put the same chord on all these. Now, in order to get this to work, you have to make sure that what you're doing is not changing the scale that the brain is automatically detecting. So instead of it being in auto mode like this, where it's detected we're in C sharp Dorian, see if I go back to this track and I put in some weird chord here, which has got a whole bunch of notes that aren't in this scale, and we go back to this track, see how it says C sharp undefined? That's because I've added a chord which is not part of the scale, and so now it can't figure out what scale I'm actually in, what key I'm in. So we can manually change it. And here I've selected C sharp Dorian, right, using these encoders here to pick this. So it won't change from this now. So you can hear that this one sounds horrible and it's out. We can, an interesting thing we can do with the tonality step component is we can add quantize to bring it back into the key. So we can say, for example, 66 or 100% in order to bring this chord back in. And the interesting thing about this is that using some other step components, you could have it being out of key and then slowly coming into key by changing the bringing the quantize in maybe randomly or over time, for example. So that's quantize. The last one that I've not mentioned is this one, transpose only. And if I'm entirely honest, I have no idea what it does. If anybody knows, let me know in the comments. So that's transpose, very powerful, lots of options. The next one is tons of fun. It's called jump. And so what we're going to do here to show this off is I'm going to have like a little different sections that you can hear. Now, if I go actually, you know what? I can just do it with a single note. So let's go over to our Epiano track again. And what we're going to do is go, nope. Oh, and we might make it more obvious. So we'll go up. And we'll unmute the track. So you can hear it now. And you can hear where we are on the sequencer. What the jump step component can do is it can move you from the step that you're on to a different step. So if I press this one here and I press the jump step component and then say I press 1, what will happen is it will go back to step 1. Every time it gets here, back to step 1, back to step 1, back to step 1. So again, it goes totally out of sync, sort of global playhead here. And you can do other things as well. You can say, okay, we're going to go, to track to step 13, for example. So it'll jump all the way over here. So it hits here, and then it's over there. Again, so everything's going out. There's other options as well. So let's do jump one step forward. So this will essentially skip a step. You can do one step back. So watch this. When it gets here, just bounce backwards and forwards because every time it hits here, it goes back one step. And you can, do the other options are back or forward. So this will be randomly. So you can hear it skipped over a step there, and then it went back one, then forward, then skip. And what you could do here is use another jump step component, which I showed you earlier, which is aligned to track position. So you can hear that it's skipping steps to bring it back in. So you can see here, it's going right out of whack, and then it gets to that one and it aligns back to the global playhead. There are some other, align to track position, and then jump to a random step. So again, this is kind of obvious what's going to happen. So it's hitting this every time and just randomly going back here. So you can see this, you can get these really interesting effects doing this. One thing that's worth pointing out is that there's weird interactions with the bar at the moment. I don't know if this will get changed in a future update. These numbers that are on here, let's say this one, for example, they are absolute numbers. So if it says jump to step 1, it's going to be jumping to step 1 in bar 1. If you have this on bar 2, for example, it will jump to step 1 on bar 1. It won't jump to step 1 on bar 2. And in fact, there's no way, as far as I can tell, there is no way to change where it's going. It will only ever go to bar 1, to step 1. It would be nice if when you press this multiple times, you could change it to, well, 17, for example, would be step 1 of bar 2. You get the idea. So that's one thing that's worth pointing out. It's not the case with the other step component, the ones like forward and backwards, which are relative. So it's always forwards and backwards relative to the step that it's on. So this will work on the later bars. So that's just a peculiarity of them at the moment. It's worth being aware of that. You can also, sorry, there's one that I didn't show you, I think. Let's turn this off just now. And let's remove this. And let's say this one here, we're going to go stay on step, and what happens is it just stays on and repeats over and over and over and over again. And you can get some interesting effects using this and some other step components, which I will mention next. Okay, so these ones are special. They are parameter, component, and trig. And what they do is they change when either a parameter lock will be applied, whether a component, a step component will be applied, or when a trig is applied. So let's start out with trig because it's the easiest to understand. So let's say what we do here is I'm going to pick these steps, so off of the beat, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this trigger step component. And so I could do, for example, every second pass. Oh, we have our jump step component active. Do I have another jump step? Okay, let's get rid of this just now and get rid of our step components. There's no way to clear just step components, so be aware of that, and you have to clear everything. Let's record this. Okay, so everything's back to normal, no step components on this. Now, if I pick these ones here and then press trig, what will happen is these will be repeated the first pass of 2, right? And that's based on the option that I picked. So if I do this now, and I do this again, it's doing skip every second trig. If I press it again, it'll skip the first trig. So it'll skip the second trig, it'll skip the first trig. So you see how I press it multiple times, so it can change which one. If I do 3, it'll happen every third trig, or I can do it every first trig, it'll skip it, or the first 2, it'll skip it. So let's play that here. So next one, you see how it's skipping that there. So again, let's pick all of these so that you can see the effect. And we can change this, so it's skipping this one, not this one. So you can change all sorts of interesting things. This can go all the way up to 8th pass round, and the last one is great, and it's random. So now I've left the notes on the beat, and you can get an interesting effect here where this is consistent and the rest are. Another cool thing that you can do, let's take those off just now, and we can use this component trigger. So let's say that for the last one we want to transpose it, so we use this tonality up a 5th. But we don't want it to happen every time. So let's say that we only want it to happen every 4th time round. We can use this one, component, to change that happening. So you can see here, it's going to skip every 4th, but if we do this and keep on pressing it, it'll skip the first 3 and it'll do it in the 4th. So it should be, no, the other way around, sorry. And it'll skip it this time. So, and again, let's see, I can do it the other way around as well. So it's going to do it, it won't do it, so it'll keep it there. So the flashing ones, sorry, are the ones that it will skip. And then the next one here. So again, you can have these interesting effects. The really cool thing is messing around with these and jump step components, right? So we can get an interesting effect if we combine together the component, step component, with jump. So if we remember before, we said that there is, let's just clear this again, just make sure we don't have anything on. And let's say on this one here, we're going to have our jump step component and it's going to stay on the step. So again, once again, so it's just staying on this indefinitely. However, we can say, add a step component and say that we want to skip it for the first 7 times. We're going to skip it, and then the 8th one we'll let it play. Now watch. So you see there, it went round 7, then 8, and it goes on. So this is a way that it makes jump components much more useful because it won't happen, every single time. So you can get some interesting effects. And I have a live stream where I'm making ambient music. You can take a look at that. I use this a lot to get weird evolving patterns and to remove things from the beat. So that is the component, step component. Very cool, lots of fun. Then the last one is the parameter step component. Now let's say that is just going to be on these last 4 steps that we're going to record this. So let's say we're going to change the texture just for these steps. So no texture, and then for these last 3 it's got this. And we can turn that off. We can say, okay, we'll only do the parameter lock, skip it every second pass. So watch this, we'll have it to start with, and then this next pass. See how it's going? Only in certain times it's using the step component. So, sorry, the parameter lock. So that's another nice way to, if you've got a bit of wild variation, that you can only bring it in particular times. This is a useful feature. So those are the parameter component and trig step components. You can, and don't forget, when you're selecting them, there are multiple options, right? When you're doing this, you have to press the button multiple times in order to be able to select them, right? The different times where it'll be skipped or where it'll be kept. And there's also random as well at the end. So that's step components. They are an incredibly powerful element of the sequencer. Get used to using them. They're very powerful. They're great fun. It's a nice element. Just play around with them. Let me show you a couple of fun things that you can do with this. So I'm going to say, so we've got this very simple little pattern, right? And then here's some fun combinations that you can do. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to use this step component here, which ramps up. So watch this. Next time round. So you see here, it's ramping up round and it repeats round in a loop. You can combine this with the multiply step component, and let's say that we do it in 4. So you can make this little flourish. And again, you could do the same thing with this one with ramp down, and we could say that this is, and this, multiply. So up and down. So you can get this kind of arpeggiated effect, which is kind of fun. Also, I've shown you already with the jump and stay on step, but I'll just show it again, just so that it's clear what's going on here. Again, let's remove these step components from those ones. You can say stay on step, and it'll just repeat over and over and over again. Oops, sorry, here. So let's skip it for the first 4. So this is an interesting effect that you can get. In this case, you can see that it's putting this sequencer out of sync here. We can put it out of sync in maybe a more obvious way by changing the number of repeats that we've got. So let's do, let's go 7 and say that it's going to, so it's going out of whack, and we can say that, well, on this step, what we want to do is align to the global track position. And we could make this even more obvious by saying, for example, we're going to have a hold on this one, and it's going to hold it for 3 steps. So you see that it's going there and it's jumping to realign it back. So it's skipping out a whole lot of steps. The last one I'll do, let's say if we go, we can actually make the sequencer run in reverse by selecting all steps and then going this one, go back 1 step. And of course we can make that go really crazy by adding in this step component here. So let's say that it'll do it on the, let's say that, yeah, we'll do it on the, we want it to skip the first time. Oh no, sorry, that's the wrong, I always get that wrong. I don't know if this has changed from the OPZ. We want the other option. So we want it like this. So it's going to skip it on the second pass. So it's going up. And I've transposed this. If you hold shift and plus and minus, you can transpose the notes. So you can get some really cool effects with this. So step components, they're great. Use them. They're fantastic. If you've got questions, they're quite deep. If you have questions, post them down below and I'll answer them if I possibly can. Okay, so next up are players, and players automate playing notes. The player button is over here, this one, and you can add it to any track in order to automate note playing. So we can say, for this one, currently we play a chord, right? And it's just a normal chord. We can, if we press this button, it can turn it on, and you can hear that we've got an arpeggiator now. There are multiple different types of players, so arpeggio, hold, and maestro. I'll go through all of them. So we'll start off with arpeggio. It's an arpeggiator. It's probably the most commonly used one. And there's a bunch of different parameters. Now I'm going to turn this one and start with, which is hold, which means it'll hold whatever chord I've played or whatever note. And the other three, so encoder 1, we've got the rate, or the speed, and we've also got pattern. So this is descending, ascending, and then ascending, then descending, and then it's repeating the top note. And this is based off of the notes as I've inputted them, and this is random. Then you've got and that's all the options there. Then you've got the octave, the number of octaves. So let's just change the octave down on this, so it's a bit easier to hear. So you get some nice effect. There's also a shift menu here, which you can use. It's got some interesting options. So this is note length to start with. You've also got different variations. So it misses various different elements out. And you've also got a glide between them. And also the last one is really nice. It's a sort of stereo, ping pong kind of stereo effect. Let's maybe make this a little bit. So arpeggiator, really nice. Next up, we've got the Maestro. If we press Shift and then press the player button, we can pick Maestro, and it plays chords. Now, if you want to set the chord, so at the moment it's playing a triad, but if we go, we can say, so now it's got the octave above as well. And it's respecting the scale from the brain. Or actually, it's respecting the intervals that you've played. Yeah, and with the scale from the brain. I'm fairly sure. There's 4 parameters here, and of course you can have up to 8 notes, so you can get some crazy chords. We'll put just a triad. You've got encoder 1 to change the roll, so you can get a nice strumming effect. And then when you've got the roll activated, you can change whether it's ascending or descending, and then this toggles between them. So you can get kind of guitar strumming style effects. And also random. This one doesn't do anything for this player, and you've also got hold. So this will hold the notes until you change. The next one is hold, and it's pretty straightforward. Let me show you. We're going to turn this off, so we can tap player to turn these on and off. Let's go to this one to show you hold. It's just a bit easier to see. So if we pick hold, and then it is basically exactly what you think it'll be. So when you press another note, it'll note off the last one and put this one. You can do it with chords. You can press stop to stop it. Another thing you can do is turn off the player. And this will turn off the chord as well. It ignores where there's a sequencer is running, but we can press stop to stop at any time. And it's as simple as that. That's the hold player. Okay, so that's players. On to our next section, motoring forward. This is the project menu. You can create and manage your projects here. You can store thousands of projects on the device itself. Because they're just note information. It's not like the OP1 field where you've got the tapes, which is recording audio. This is just note data, so you can store thousands and thousands of these on the device itself. And the project menu is how you manage them. So when you press project, there are 4 menus that come up where you can create a new project, you can save, you can rename, and you can configure a project. Configuration is per project. So if you alter the configuration in this menu, it'll be saved specifically to your project and not globally. So you change projects, it'll have new config. And this is useful because it's got lots of interesting options here that you probably only want set up for a particular project. M2 here creates a snapshot. So let's turn stuff back on and then mess about with it so that you can hear what's going on here. Right? Now let's say that I want to then go in. What I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to create a snapshot. So I'm going to put save. This is the state that I want to be in. Okay, so if you press Shift plus project, you'll get into the project folder menu. M1 will load a project when you select it, but there's also this other option here, right? So you can just change to another one. And let's say, for example, here's one of my projects here, and I can load it up and play it. Right? Or I can go back to the one that we were on, and I can click load. But you can also say press history, and you can see here that this is the latest one it's on. So let's say, for example, let's go back and add that back in again now. And then I press save again. Now this is latest. If I go into this menu though, and I press history, then you can see that I've got 3 different snapshots. That's the horrendous one. And I can move down to this one and I can click load and then I press save and save the snapshot again. So that's the latest one. So this is a really useful feature. Use save frequently. And of course, if you're doing something live and you want to really mess up your sequence, you can use save to do this and then revert back to an earlier state later on. Okay, the other options inside this menu are load, history, and we've also got duplicate. So you can pick a project and then use that as the basis for duplication. Now, I've done something here which I think is pretty handy. I've set up this default project and I've started with a hashtag and called it base. I can then press duplicate and you can see it's made base 2, and then I can rename this whatever I like. 1 base 2 or whatever, I don't know, something like this. And the cool thing about this is that I've made like a default setting for this. So if I go into here, one of the main things I've done is I've made 2 patterns for all of them, and I've set the first one to pattern 2. Now there's a reason for that. I'm not going to talk about it just now, but I think that I find very useful. If we go into this menu here, you can see that I've duplicated that there. So this is a nice feature to have. Let's go back to our P1 and show you the last one. Let's load it. Now, the last thing you could do is delete a project. Be careful. Be careful with the delete. It is unforgiving. As soon as you press this, it'll be gone, right? So 1 base 2, pressing delete is gone. Now, okay, that's not great. This thing has disappeared. And so be very careful of this. The one thing that's good about this is that as soon as you delete something, it goes to the project you currently have loaded. You can't delete the one you've got loaded. So if you press delete a whole bunch of times, you won't just delete all your projects. I mean, it gives me the fear. One other nice thing is that there is an autosave option. You might have, for example, a snapshot of your project that's in autosave, even if you do delete it. So you can maybe find it again if this is a problem. I have had it where I've deleted one by accident. I was able to get a snapshot from this autosave folder. So this is a useful thing. Okay, so that is the project folder menu. Let's run through some of the project settings. So if we press config, we'll go to this project settings menu, and there's a bunch of different options here. So you can hear the first thing that we have in general is global transpose. So you can hear I can just transpose it by a number of semitones. So this is a full octave up or a full octave down. And this could be useful if you've made something and then you're jamming with other people and they want, oh, well, I'm playing a harmonica and it's tuned to A. Can you change the tuning of your patterns to A, and you can transpose it. So this does it for everything, all the notes. Interestingly, if we go here, and then we go into this menu. Sorry, we go into this menu again. Now watch as I change this. It has no effect on the keyboard, right? It's only sequence notes. Okay, so that's worth mentioning. In Tempo 2, so again, you're using encoder 1 to change through the folder here, and then you've got the different options, and then you've got the value for that option. You've got time signature. Now, let me show you what time signature does. It does not change the number of steps on the sequencer, right? It changes the metronome, and it changes I think it changes the quantization. So if we change it to, so we've got 4/4 at the moment, and let's turn the metronome on and turn it up so you can hear it. If we go into this menu and we change this value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you see how it's changed the metronome here, and it's changing. See, 1, 2, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So we've got, these are quarter notes, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we can have eighth notes, 1, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is useful if you're wanting to do different time signatures. You can make this easier on yourself. So let's say that I go to this pattern. If I hold bar, you can change the length of the bar. So you could change this to be 7 steps long or 14 steps long, and then everything will start to sync up a bit better. So let's say 14 steps long, and we've got 7th, 8th, right? So let's watch this now, the playhead. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you're wanting to do time signatures that are not 4/4, then you can change the metronome in here, and then you can change the actual length of the sequence to have that number of steps. So this is divisible by 7, right? So now when we start to sequence in here, so let's just go. And let's unmute this. So it sounds unusual because it's in this compound time signature, but you know, the nice thing about this is then everything is matched up here, and you could really do it and you know, make a song in a different time signature. I'm going to quickly change this back, the track scale, the length of the sequence. So you can change the length based on this here, right? So let's go back into the config, and we can also change the groove type here. Now let's just, yeah, this will work fine for this. And let's just put, let's change it back to, all I'm going to do here is just record. So it should have been. So let's go back into this menu here, and we'll change this. So this is the same as in the metronome, but you can see the names of them, which is useful. So we've got shuffle and half shuffle and Danish and Bambora. I'm going to show this, but let's say that we have put the shuffle to accent. This is, oh sorry, let's put the shuffle up, and we'll go back to this menu here, and we'll do config, and we'll say it's accents at the moment, and we can change wobbly, Danish, prophetic. Prophetic has some really interesting effects on the whole thing. Let's turn on the drum. It has effects on other things, not just it's certainly affecting the velocity, and I think it might actually affect the trigs in some way. Anyway, it's interesting. Play around with those. They're lots of fun. So that's the groove type, but we're going to come back to those, and I'll show you them in a little bit more detail. So let's put it back to just straight shuffle at the moment, and reset it back and turn it off. Okay, the next one is the voices menu. Now, like I mentioned at the start, there's 24 voice polyphony. It does a really good job of voice stealing. I've not actually come across it doing this very often. It's worth pointing out, if you're in the project menu, there's a little symbol that comes up here, looks like a CPU. If that is white, then it means that the sequencer is quite heavily, the CPU is under quite a lot of load. If you see it red, then basically you're getting voice stealing. So if you see a little red CPU symbol up here, it looks like a little computer chip, then it means that you've got some voice stealing going on. Now, if you want to prioritize particular things, maybe for your melody or something like this, or your drum track, then you can assign voices, a number of voices to particular tracks. So you could say, well, my drum track, I always want to be guaranteed that I'm going to get the 4 voices I need for my, my hi-hat, my snare, my cymbal, and my kick drum. So you can assign some voices and it'll freely assign the other ones. And this one, it'll guarantee there's always 4 voices. So if you have problems with voice stealing, that's how to change it there. The next one is MIDI, and now there is an external MIDI aux track, and there's an external MIDI engine so that you can apply to any of the instrument tracks as well. This enables you to send MIDI from an instrument track whilst having another engine loaded, right? So this means that if you have, for example, this one here, the Epiano, we can also, it won't send MIDI by default, but if we have this option here, we can say, okay, well, on track 4, track 4 for this one, we want it to be sending the same MIDI that's on the sequencer to channel 2, right? So all the note-on information and pitch bend and stuff like this, it'll send it over to channel 2. And if you've got something connected over MIDI from USB or Bluetooth or from the MIDI out here, then it will send that MIDI information and affect that device. So this is a useful feature to have, that you can turn this on for all of them if you wanted to, but they're off by default. So it doesn't send it by default. And I think, I think in the OPZ, it was on by default. I can't remember if that was the case, but anyway, and this is saved on a per project basis. So if you send MIDI from, say, track 4 on one project, when you load up a new one, by default, it won't send any MIDI. Okay, so that's the project settings menu. There is also the tempo options here. Now, I've mentioned these briefly. You can tap the tempo, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got like around 140 BPM, or we could have it slower, about 80 BPM, and you can modify it with encoder 1, and you can do shifts to do fine modifications if you want to really sync it up with something. Then after that, encoder 2 sets the groove type, the same as in the menu, the project config menu, then the groove amount, so either plus or minus. The last thing is we've got encoder 4, which will set the metronome volume, and we can turn it on and off by clicking this down. So that's the tempo settings. Okay, so let's talk about the different grooves. So I showed you that you can change this in the config menu. You can also change it in here. Let's start off with straight shuffle. So this is what we have by default. I'll leave the metronome on because this is useful sometimes to hear where the emphasis is. And let's turn it up. So that's straight shuffle, and you can make it anticipate the beat. So it's like coming a little bit early. Right, and then we can reset it. Let's put it up a little bit and then do half shuffle. HS is the first one. Then we've got, so HS is just a little bit less severe. And then we've got Danish, which sort of bunches things up. So it's like sort of bunched and then stretched, then bunched and stretched. So this is quite a nice one. Let's change it to Bombara. Then we can have, and let's listen to that anticipating it as well. So it's changing like the phase of it almost. And then we're going to do wobble. So this gives a really interesting feel. Then we've got Gaussian. If we put it right down. Okay, let's put it back up here. Then we've got accent. Then island nod. Then disfunk. Then roll over. And then the last one is prophetic. So you can get all sorts of different effects with the grooves. They're really interesting. Play around with them. And the best thing to do is, just if you've got something that's feeling a little bit stale, try one of them and change the amounts. And don't forget to try the negative values, because for a half shuffle, it always has this weird anxious anticipation. But actually, with some of these other ones, you don't get a feeling like that, really. Okay, so next one, we're going to go through the modes. We're going to talk about instrument modes to start with. So all of the details about the instrument mode here. So you press this button here to activate instrument mode. It has 8 tracks, which you select with 1 through 8 here. Okay, and these are all different engines that are loaded in. Like this one's the drum sampler engine, this one is Prism, this one is Epiano, etc. You're not stuck with these. These are the default ones. I don't think I've changed any. These are the default ones, but you can assign anything you like. So in this one, this is the multi-sampler engine, but you can change it to something else. If you press Shift and M1, then you can bring up this menu and you can pick different options. So we could have organ, for example. Or any other engine that you like. And it will reset it to some like default patch for that if you load it up through the M1 menu. There are currently 12 different engines. So Axis Dissolve. So 8 of them are synth based and 3 of them are sample based. And then there's one which is an external MIDI. I'm going to run through these in a little bit. They all basically have common parameters. So page 1 is different. Right, you can see how it's changing the parameters. This one's got swarm, AM, FM, and detune, whereas this one has tone, ratio, shape, and tremolo. So they all vary between the engines. But on page 2, 3, and 4, basically there's common parameters. So there's a filter, there's an LFO, there is envelopes. So these are basically common between them. And I'm going to run through the common things to start with, and then I'll talk about the specific synth engines. One thing to mention, there's not really, I can't think of another place where I could mention this. You can link together tracks by using, when you're on this menu, if you do, you hold the button down, and let's say we're currently on this Prism, just the bass. If I hold this down, I can link the track and play this engine at the same time, and it'll send pitch bend as well. So you could set up another channel as another track as a sub oscillator for them. You can actually do this up to have a whole bunch. So you can actually have this just a multi sort of layered synth, and you could do all sorts of things to bring in and out the parts using the LFO, for example, or something like that. I think that you can only have up to 4. After that, it'll start to change the last one. And you can turn them off again by pressing it. So this is a nice feature. So there we go. These are the tracks. You can link them together. You can assign engines to them. Let's talk about, let's go into Dissolve and start looking at the parameters here. Now I'm going to save so I can get back to this if I need to. In M2, if you press, whilst you're in instrument mode on any of the tracks, if you press M2, you'll get to the envelope. And it enables you, basically what the envelope is doing is automating parameter changes. Now they're restricted in what they can do. The first one is amp is essentially altering the volume of the sound, right? So you can see the easiest example of this, if I open this right up, so I have this attack, decay, sustain, and release. If I have this all the way across to the left, for this one, I have this all the way up to the top. So well, actually, if I have the sustain all the way up to the top, and then I open up the release, then you'll get this just. Now you can see as well, I've got some reverb on. I might turn off the reverb temporarily just to be able to, so that you can hear what's going on. So this is totally dry signal for this one, right? And then of course we can change this. Attack will phase in the sound, and we can have it at the sustain level. When you hold it, it will drop down to this level. If I put it higher, it won't get as quiet. If I go down like this, it'll fade out completely. Now I can also do release, and this will be how quickly it drops down to nothing. So it can make a plucky sound. And you can hear it's just decaying away to nothing. Or I could have something with like a really long release where, let's say that is, see how it's very slowly decaying down now. Sorry, very slowly releasing the note. So this has probably, I'd say maybe the largest effect on the overall sound, right, is by changing the envelope. So you can have something that sounds more like strings, or you can have something that sounds more like a harpsichord, for example, and dying away, or a xylophone or something like that. So this is the envelope. Now you have actually, let's put this right the way back up again so we can hear it. The other one, if you click down on one of these encoders, I think it works with any of them, you'll switch between the amp envelope and the filter envelope. And the filter envelope will control, it can control the cutoff of the filter, which I'll come to in a second, but it also you can use the filter one to automate other parameters as well. And again, I'll come back to that in a second. So before we go on to that, we're going to press, if we press shift when we're in M2, we get this play mode menu. And if we have this legato on at the moment, but the play mode, so we have, for example, this is monophonic, only a single note at a time. And because we've got legato, it's keeping this held and then goes up to this note and down again. If we go, we can change this mode with the encoder 1 here, change it to poly. So it's polyphonic now, right? Or we can change it to mono. If we go back to legato, then we can change the glide time of this. So we can do. So if you want to get some sort of so legato is nice to get these type of effects. Now remember, you can change the portamento value for your legato, the glide time, using this step component again here. So this is really nice. So you can change this to get different effects. I think it does mention unison in the manual as well, but I don't think I found an engine that actually has an option which is unison, which is, yeah, so I'm not sure whether that's from an old version or something like this. The other thing is you can affect the pitch bend. So if I do it by default, it'll move up by 2 semitones, so you hear it's going up to this note here, right? Or down to this note here. But you can change that and say, okay, it's only 1 semitone, so it'll go up to this one or down to this one. So it's going to those 2. Or you can change it up to, like, I think by up to an octave. So it'll go from this up to this. And down as well. So this is quite fun, and you can completely turn it off. And this is useful if you've got tracks linked and you want pitch bend not to be sent to the other one, then you can turn this off in one. Then this last one is it's sort of equivalent to VCA on a synth. So this is the actual output level. And this is early on in the signal chain. So you can, if it's just a little bit quiet and the mixer is up high, double check this, and you can change this. So you can hear, right? It's just the bass volume. So if it's coming through a bit loud, this is the one to check to start with. And then it'll affect the range that you can get across in this mixer setting, which I'll talk about later. Okay, so that is the play mode menu. This is on M2, hold shift, that's how you do that. Okay, next one is filter. So M3 is filter. Now, if I press this, I can turn it on and off. And a filter will, let's change this to start with, it will filter out particular frequencies, right? And we can change the type of filter. I'll do this straight away because I want to change it to a ladder filter. Right, so there's the high frequencies. I can also change it to high pass filter so that this is completely open, all the sound's going through, and then I can just take the high pitch frequencies instead. Right? let's say the ladder here. The next parameter here is the resonance. So at the cutoff point, it's going to basically accentuate those resonances. So if we put this here, so without the resonance, and if you boost it right the way up, you can get this nice effect with it. And then the next thing you can do is this is to do with the envelope amount. So you've got the filter envelope here. So let's say that we're going to click down and we're going to make it quite punchy. So it's going to decay the filter quickly. Now this has no effect here. But if we have this filter envelope amount, it'll start wide, sort of open, and then bring it down, and we can. So you can get this nice effect, and of course you can bring down the resonance if you don't want it so much. Now, a thing that you'll notice here is if I go right down, the sound is quite different. It has a different tone because this sort of frequency is absolute. We can do key tracking, which will change the cutoff based on where you are. So if I put this down, now if I go down, it has a more similar sonic character in whatever octave you're in. So this is key tracking. It changes the cutoff based on the note number. So as you're going up and down the keyboard. So that's the filter there. Try the different filters out. They're really nice. Next up we have the track send menu. So on M3, if we hold shift, this is track send. And this is what will go to the output jack using the multi-jack out, and I'll talk about that later. What goes to the tape track, I've not talked about the tape track yet, I'll talk about that later, so you can control the amount of this instrument that's going there. And then we can say effects 1 and 2. Now these ones, if I do, for example, this is the send to effect 2, which is the reverb at the moment. Right, so that's pretty clear what it's doing. And the other one is delay. So that's the effect sends that you've got there. So you can tweak and tune where the sound is getting sent to, and that's on the shift menu on M3 as well. Okay, so next up we've got the LFO menu, which you open with M4, and you can turn it on and off, right, and cycle between it. I am currently on this one here. Turn it on and off. And now what an LFO does is it modulates a parameter, like tone here, but it does this automatically. So it's similar to an envelope where it's modulating a parameter over a set period of time, it changes, but this does it continuously, the LFO. It stands for low frequency oscillator. So there are a bunch of different LFO types. You can set them by pressing Shift and M4. And for example, let's have a look to start with at Element here. So Element is interesting. It's actually probably the weirdest one, and maybe that means it's not the best one to start with, but what it does is it uses a variety of different input sources to modulate things. One of them can be, for example, G here is the gyroscope. So let's say we have this set to tone. When we tilt the device, it changes the tone. We could also send it to ratio, for example. So this is gyroscope being sent there. You can also do it with the microphone, for example. So this is the built-in microphone. And you could change the amount of that, so just a tiny bit, which is quite nice. You can also have it varied based on the envelope, and this is the filter envelope. So we can see here. So this is coming. The value is coming up straight away, and then it's decaying down, but we can change the filter envelope, and then we can have it build up, for example. We could have it happening quite slowly. And we can have it happen a lot so you can hear it. So this is a really nice effect that you can get using the filter envelope, and especially useful if you're not using the filter, right? I've got it turned off at the moment. you can use it to modulate something else instead. The other one is sum. So you've got some mixture of those different values. So that is the different sources. Let's put it to the filter envelope. You've got the amount here, which I've shown you, so we can have minus the amount, or we can have positive the amount. You can pick the destination here, so this is synth parameters, and then your LFO 4, your encoder 4 will choose between these different parameters, so tone, ratio, shape, and tremolo for this engine. And you can see here, for example, that I could do shape as well, or tone. But then I can also have the destination set to, for example, the envelope. Then as well, we've got filter, so we can say the cutoff. Let's turn the filter on. Turn right down the resonance, and turn this down as well. So it's slowly opening, right? So we're basically just using the filter envelope to do this, but we could do it with gyroscope as well. So you can hear, right, got it pressed, open, close, and we can make it even more obvious if we open this up and then added a bunch of resonance. And we'll go back here. And we can, if we change this to be fully negative instead, then tilting it the other direction will open it up. So you can get some cool effects with this, right? Which is pretty nice. So, and the other ones, there's things like the for element, there's the amplifier options as well, volume. You can do pitch. Or change them. Oh, sorry, let's turn off the filter. So you can make spooky ghost noises as well, if you like. So they're the different options, and you can look at the different destinations and send it to there, and you can get nice variation. Element is very good for sort of performance stuff. Okay, the next one is the random LFO. So let's load this up, and this is sample and hold. So let's see what we're changing here. Let's change tone. And let's increase the amount. And we'll change it to ratio, it might be a bit easier to hear. Right, so this is randomly, and we can do this very quickly, for example, or much more quickly. Very fast. So this is, yeah, so we can, basically it's just randomly doing this, and we can affect how it's running, basically. We can affect the amount here. Now you can have it key synced, so you can see it stops, and then it only starts when we press the key, or you can have it free running, and it'll run all the time. You can't really tell here, but it'll be running all the time, and won't be reset in between, so it'll be continued to change. You can set it to so you've got the key synced one, you've got the free one for all of these as well, and you've got your destinations include the filter, and so let's do filter cutoff, for example, and make sure that it's on. And we've also got a little envelope here. If we hold shift, we can change this, so we can bring it in, for example, if we do this, and it'll get more and more severe. Let's turn it back to the ratio, and it might be a bit clearer. So nothing there to start with. Turn this off, sorry. So see how it kind of fades in. So yeah, sample and hold, you can get some nice effects with it. Next up after that, we've got Tremolo, which is really useful because it can vary the pitch and the volume with one LFO. Let's change to this piano to do this. We'll make sure that's turned off. And actually it's already loaded up with this engine. So you can actually hear it's already got a bit. Hopefully you can hear that, it's quite subtle. Here. So now it's a bit less subtle. Let's just make sure. Let's go here and make, yeah, let's turn this right up. So this is what the, so we've got the rate to start with, so we can have this, same as the last one, you can have it synced to the sequencer in various different divisions, or you can have this free running one. And you can change the vibrato, and you can have the volume as well. So really nice. And of course you can, there's also a wee envelope here, so you can bring this in. So it starts off with an out any. And then the longer you hold it, the more comes in. So it starts straight away. And this one will have it and then it'll fade out. So you get the vibrato and then it goes off. And you can also click down to change the shape of the waveform. It's square wave, and then with a more narrow width, pulse width, and then sine wave, saw wave. So this is a useful one. Okay, tremolo. And the next one is value. And let's go back to here and we'll pick value. And we're going to say, again, the options are very similar, the amount, plus or minus, and let's say we're going to start off with ratio. And again, we've got divisions here, how quickly this is occurring. So we can make it happen much slower or very fast. If we click down on this, we can change the shape. So this is a sine wave or a square wave, or a reverse saw or a saw. So here's sine wave, right? And we can go not synced either. And we can change other parameters as well. You can do the filter, you can have it free running, or you can have it synchronized with the keyboard. So this'll, I release, it'll reset every time I do it if I have it free running. You can hear that, hopefully, if I get it a wee bit slower maybe. Right, now when I press this, when it's free running, you hear that it's always going at the same pace, the LFO, whereas this one, it always happens when it starts the LFO when I press the keys. So this is pretty nice. These are the LFOs. Totally changed the sound of the synth engine by automating parameter changes. Next, onto preset settings. Now, I've shown this menu a couple of times. If you press Shift and Instrument, you can get into the preset settings. And there's a bunch of different options here. So the first thing that's worth mentioning is that we have a high pass filter for everything. It's separate from the filter you've got here. So say there's an awful lot of bottom end on this, we can filter out some of the bottom end. Here now we're just getting the higher frequency stuff. So if your mix is getting a little bit muddy, you might want to take off some of the low end on elements that are not the bass. And then it won't kind of clash with that quite so much. Okay, so that is the high pass filter. It's nice that you've got this for everything. Don't forget that it's there because it's super useful. The next one is the velocity sensitivity now. I've turned it off here, right? But if I have this on, you can get very quiet or much louder. And again, the velocity sensitivity, you need to have it on in order for it to respect the velocity step component. The next one you have is the Portamento type. So, for example, now if I go here and back to this menu here, the envelope one, and I press this, then I can get the play settings. And let's say that I want to have a lot of Portamento. So you can hear it gliding between the notes. If we do this, we can change the way that it glides between. We can change it to exponential rather than linear. If we go back, so it's like this slower change between it. You can change it to a different shape for the way that Portamento changes. Let's go back to this menu and take off the Portamento. Let's go over to this one for some of the next ones. It's going to be a little bit easier to show you them. So the one to mention, I'm going to mention quickly before we get into the tuning ones, is that you can set the stereo width. So you can get this, it kind of ping-pongs around the stereo field. And you can have a bit of a chorusy type effect. And you can do this again per instrument. So each of these tracks you can set this value. And it's really, you get a really nice effect with it. So don't forget that it's there. The next one are there's really extensive tuning options. So let me just double check again that we've got, okay, this is good, nice and make it easier to hear. Now, to start with, I'm going to change this preset by default has the tuning root changed, and I want to change this back to C, and it just makes it easier to show you what's going on here. You have a bunch of different tunings, this one here. So to start with, if we put it to equal tempering, so this is the default tuning, and then we can change the tuning. So the most obviously different one here is we can change it to bagpipe, which pleases me because I'm Scottish. So if I change this, so this one, you can hear that it's very slight differences in the tuning. And there's things like guitar, and like I said, so there's something funny going on here, right, with the tuning. It's slightly different. Basically what it's doing is it's saying, well, an A, for example, is not the same frequency as it would be in equal tempering. And it turns out there's some options here where you can actually define the tuning yourself. So let's say, for some reason, you want this E flat and to be tuned differently. So you can pick whichever note you like. So this is already tuned differently, right? Let's see. Let's fix this. So if we've got large changes in the pitch here. So that's default, but let's change this one here, and we could change it quite a lot. And it's quite hard to tell by itself, but so they now sound the same, right? So you can tune it like it would be your favorite instrument, basically, if this is something that would be useful for you. I'm going to change it back to equal tempering here to start with. Okay, so when you're in that editing menu, you've got big changes and small changes on encoder 1 and 2. The last thing here is that you can also transpose based the preset. So I showed you global transpose in the project menu, but there's per instrument transpose here. And the difference here is it also affects the keyboard. This is very handy if you want to make a bass, but you want a particular octave, for example, +0, to be always pitched down, and then it's useful if you're linking tracks together. Because, for example, if we're here and we're on this octave, we link it together to this one, it will always be pitched down. So now you've made like a sort of sub oscillator or something like this. Let's turn that off. So back into this menu here. So you can go 3 octaves down and up. And again, it's per instrument. It's not based on the global transpose like you have in this menu here, global transpose. Okay, so that is the tuning settings that you've got. Then you've got mod settings. Now these are pretty cool. They're quite deep. you can, let's go, first of all, we're going here and we're going to turn the pitch bend off. So pitch bend, let's go in here actually and do it. And we're going to turn the pitch bend off for this. And turn off the LFO, and then I might just... Okay, now if I pitch bend, this is turned off just now. Let's put it up here. Right, so that's our pitch bend. But if I turn this off, pitch bend doesn't do anything. But what I can do is in this menu, I can route pitch bend to something else. So I'm going to say synth 2, which I know for this one is FM, or ratio, sorry. And then I can say the amount that I want. So I'm going to have lots. Let's turn it down a wee bit actually. So you see that the pitch bend is changing the ratio there. Or I could change it to another synth parameter. So the tone, for example, is synth parameter 1. Let's change the amount. Oops, sorry, down here. The amount to... And as well, you can use not just the pitch bend for this, you could also send it with velocity as well. So nice and... And again, you could change it to synth 2, which is ratio, so it's very obvious. So you can route all sorts of different mod sources like velocity or pitch bend into this, and also mod wheel if you've got an external MIDI controller, mod wheel and aftertouch as well. So this is really nice, and you know, combined with this menu where you can turn off what the pitch bend is doing, you can affect different things here. And this is really interesting because it works with, so let's see, if we go in here, we can see that we've got pitch bend sent to synth 1. Let's turn up the tempo a little bit again and unmute this. Now what we can do is we can put in a pitch bend, some pitch bend step components here, and of course pitch bend has been turned off for this. So now it's affecting a different parameter, right? Now we could do this with parameter locks, but we can do it in a maybe more controllable way. And of course, again, these ones come into their own now, which are not so useful where you do fade down or fade up, which do it. So this is a really nice trick that you can do. So velocity and the bend step components can be used to modify other parameters now. Let's say we like this. Quite a cool preset this, so now we can think about saving it and how we go about doing that. Now to start with, you can access, now I showed you how to set the instrument by pressing Shift and M1, but we can also access presets. So for example, say that we want to look at presets for track 8, we can say Shift and track 8, and then we'll get a whole bunch of presets. So, and we can choose things with this encoder, the encoder 1, and pick different options, right? So these are different presets that you can access using this menu here. So Shift and then press an instrument, you can load a preset. If you hold the Shift menu and then use the encoder, it changes how they're sorted. So category, and you can define your own categories. I'll tell you more about that later. But you can also do the engine here. And so, for example, say that we know that it's an axis one that we want. We can pick different presets, same with any of the other engines here. You can select them. So this is how we can get our different presets. If you pick, so this one is one that I've made. And I've got the option to delete it and also to rename it. So I can say, okay, well, I'm going to change it from bottle or whatnot. So once you're in you've got a preset loaded, if you hold the track, or actually, anytime you've got anything loaded, if you hold the track, then you'll get up the preset options. And there's a few things that you can do. So for example, you can scramble the parameters. And this is quite fun for finding that needs some legato, right? Let's go to legato and then turn up. So Scrabble is a really nice way to find some presets, right, that you might like, and it just varies all of the options. You can also copy and paste. So for example, if I wanted to put this onto a different track, say copy between it, I could do copy, and then if I pick another track here, for example, this one, I could do paste, and now on this, I've got the same preset on both of these. It doesn't copy any of the notes or anything, just the preset. And this is useful sometimes where you want to copy a drum kit into maybe 4 tracks so that you can individually mute things. The last thing that you can do is you can save the preset, right? So I actually quite like this, and I'd quite like to get it back. So if I hold this down, I can click save. And what happens there is it makes, if I go into the category snapshot, for example, these are ones that I've renamed. You can see my latest snapshot here, so I can click rename, and I can change its name to whatever I like. So I can call it Sod or whatever it might be, or cancel if I don't want to rename it. So it's in my snapshots there. So you can make these snapshots, you can rename them later. And here's a whole bunch of other ones that I've made. So this is the preset, how the presets modes work, how you create new ones. And they're all saved onto the disk, and you can export them and send them to other people as well, if you like. Okay, so we are about halfway through. At least in the slides, we're about halfway through. And if you have any questions or any thoughts, please put them down in the comments below. Thanks for sticking with it. I appreciate it's pretty intense, quite long. Is there something wrong? Is there something that's not clear? Ask down below, ask me to clarify. If you find it useful, please consider liking and subscribing. I do content about this. I live stream music creation. I do music technology, programming videos, things like this as well. And consider sharing the video with anyone else that has an OPXY or is interested in one if they want to find out a bit more. So thanks for watching so far. I appreciate it. Okay, let's carry on. Now that is all of the generic parameters that I've shown you, right? But there are various different synth engines that you can load up. Now these are the synth ones, they're not sample based at the moment, I'll come to those later. But there's 8 different synth engines, as well as the sample engines and the external engine, which is now called MIDI actually as of the latest update. And you can load them in these different ways. And I'll just go through each of these and show you a preset for them so you can get some, or a couple of presets. So the first one is Axis, which is actually loaded up here. And it has 4 different parameters. It has tone, ratio, so it's like an FM synth. It's good for lush string sounds apparently, and shape, and tremolo. So, and if we load this up, let's have a look, and we'll load by engine, and I'll show you a couple of different presets. So classic FM bell sound, and then those that bow they were talking about. I like this one, coin. Okay, so that is Axis, FM synthesizer, good for lush string sounds and other things as well. You can hear it's quite diverse, and it's an FM based synth engine. Next one is Dissolve. If we go Shift and open this up, we go to Dissolve. This is, yep, it is a tonal noise synth, and it's good for pads and leads. So let's show you with Swarm as the first parameter, AM. And then you've got FM. And of course the character of this is affected massively by the envelope. I actually like that, so I'm going to save it. Save a snapshot of it. And then the detune is the last parameter. So let me show you a couple of the presets for it. You can see my one there that I've loaded up. This is one of my ones as well. And there is Gaussian's quite nice. Off guard. It's another one of mine. Okay, so that is the Dissolve synth engine. And next up, we've got Epiano. Okay, so let's pick this here. And it is a electronic piano emulator. They suggest it for powerful leads and thick basses. It's got a tone parameter, texture as well. You've got punch, which adds a little bit of movement to the sound. You've also got tine, which sort of emulates an electric piano, like a Rhodes piano or something like this. So let's load up some presets. So let's turn off the reverb on this one. Well, actually, let's just turn down the envelope. The release is a little bit high. And then we'll go back and tunes. And needs tuning. Okay, so that is Epiano. So hard sync, it's pretty interesting one. You can get nice results with it. Then we've got organ. So if we load this up here, it is, let me load up this one. This is one of my ones. So yeah, it's an organ emulator, and it's really nice. It can go from transistor all the way to church. And you can bring in and out a sort of sub-oscillator. Let's see. No. You can change the amount of tremolo and the speed of the tremolo. We play equal cadence there. So yeah, it's an organ emulator, and there's lots of different sounds you can get. I love this. It's really nice. It's got quite a diverse range of sounds you can get with it. Let's have a look at some of the presets. That was my one, Ball Game. And there's Dingus, Manual. Vestigial. Avant-garde. So you can hear here that it's like plucky. It might be an organ emulator, but it can get these plucky sounds too. Then there's Prism. Prism is great. It's a really interesting one as well, and it's a great bass synth. It's got this cool graphic as well, so you can change the shape, ratio, you can detune it, you can have a stereo field sort of effect as well. And it's different from the width option here because it's consistent. Okay, let's have a look at some of the presets for this. Alloy. You've got dark. Let's see, medieval. Let's see, night sky. And let's see, slush. So that's the Prism synth, again really good for basses and things like this. Then we've got what's coming next? We've got simple. So let's load this up here. It's as it sounds. Well, they say quickly craft basic patches, great for leads and plucks. It starts off, we've got the shape, and it goes from kind of, let's turn this off. It goes from saw to square. I'm going to snapshot this one as well, sorry. And we can change the pulse width, and of course we could put an LFO on to change the pulse width. And let's go to change it. Save this one as well. Might as well save the snapshots. They're actually very small files, so at least for the synth engines, when they've got samples loaded in, they can be quite large. Okay, and then so we've got shape, and of course pulse width. It doesn't affect the saw, right? So it only affects it if you've got it in the square side of the range. You've also got noise. And stereo as well. Love this graphic too. Okay, so that is simple. Let's have a look at some of the presets. Using sample and hold there for burpee. So you can get very different sounds with it, right? And then, so yeah, that's simple. You know, it says quickly do this. It's got some really interesting parameters. You can get a range of effects with it as well. And then we've got Wavetable. Again, this is maybe one of my favorite. I think maybe my favorite. And it is a. Let's load this up here. So it's a wavetable synthesizer, and let's turn all these down to start with. And if we get something simple, so it's just a sine wave, so probably good for basses, and it sort of morphs. You can choose so that's the wavetable, and you can choose the position in it to morph between different sounds. You've also got, let's turn this up a wee touch. So basic, we've got a triangle wave, which we can morph into a square wave, and then into a sine wave. And then you've got different parameters like warp, which will offset things and get some weird patterns. And you can also drift as well. Ooh. Get some kind of belt-like effects. Really metallic sounding. I'm gonna save that as well. Quite like that. So, yep, this is Wavetable. And you have a whole range of different wavetables. And of course, you can use the LFO to modify the wavetable position, which is a really nice effect. So let's have a look at some of the presets for that. So it's a triangle, I like that one. Ulysses. Wobbly. So yeah, really the synth engines are lovely. You can get some really nice effects with them, play around with them, mess around with the filter and the envelope. You know, these will really change the sound of them. And don't forget, of course, just try scrambling them. Until you find something you like. Oops. So yeah, you can play around with the parameters there, and you can, it's easier to, if you do the scramble, it's easier to kind of get a range of the possibilities because it goes to much more extreme values than you might normally change them to. Some sound design thoughts. Don't forget that you can link tracks. So let's let me put this onto something else. So I could link this with my dissolve track on track 5. So we can add that as like a sub-oscillator and stack them up and get some really nice, totally rich sounds, especially if you're just using it as a synthesizer and not sequencing. You know, you could use multiple voices to get really rich sounds. Then there's, don't forget the preset menu as well. We've got that high pass filter that we can, and the width. So we could cut off a bit of the low end, for example, if we thought it was a bit too much. So that can really, again, change the sound of this. But don't forget it's there because you might have it on and think, oh, it's sounding a bit thin. Double check that your high pass isn't on in the preset. Also, you can, the effects obviously have massive impact. And there's a whole range of them, which I'll go into a little bit. And there's also the master sort of level effects. Don't know what I did there. Let's go into the master level effects. So we've got EQ. We'll talk about this more, which can really change the sound, and the saturator, which can add. But these are applied to everything, right? So all sounds. There's also, you can use external effects, or you can route audio out, send particular audio. If we go, for example, into here, we can send to the audio out. So we could do this, and it would send some of this track to the out, when the multi-track out. You can put it into an FX pedal and then send it back around and put it into the audio in, which you can access on this aux track here, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then as well, yeah, there's the players can alter the sound, right? If we put this on and we put on ping pong, well, let's unlink those. because we've got this stereo on here, it's got this ping-ponging effect. So the players can alter the sound as well, obviously, if we massively. So yeah, don't forget about the players. They can have a nice impact as well. So that's my thoughts on sound design. Mess around, scramble them, save them. They take up actually for the synth engines in particular, they take up no space at all. So mess around with them, mess them up, and see what happens. Okay, so next up we've got auxiliary mode. Right, we went through, this is us finished instrument mode. And now we're going to go into auxiliary mode. So the instrument mode is these 8 tracks here. It's a white LED when it's on them. And if we press the auxiliary mode, we can switch between these different tracks. And they do all sorts of really interesting things. Let's load this back up again. And we'll go to history. And we'll say, choose this one, maybe this, and load again. Okay. Oh, that was the first one. Okay, so we go back in, history, and choose this one here. And we'll click load. Okay, so now we're back to our original pattern that we had. We'll start off with the brain. So press auxiliary, press this one, and I've shown this already, right? So you can just try, you can transpose, and there's an interesting trick you could do. If the sequencer's off, and you can, it'll start the sequencer when you press something using when the brain track is on, even if the sequencer isn't running. You can press keys or particular chords. So you can see here that if I press this, it's D major. If I add in different keys, I can change what it is. Right, so we can change the key like this. You can have it auto detect. You can set it manually. And if you're setting it manually, so you encoder 1 will change between manual and auto, and once it's in manual, you can set it so that you can change the root note. So this is C sharp, for example, or the scale. I'm in Dorian at the moment. The last parameter is link, and you can link the master track to another track. So let's say, for example, I want it to go to, what do we have on, let's say, link it to 7, the instrument track 7, which is a pad on this. So let's say that we want it like this. So we can, let's mute track 7. And now if we go back to our brain, if I play this, I can play chords on this and transpose. And I can link it to a different track. So this is useful. You can live play and then, so you can live play and you can set it off again as well. So that is basically the extent of things with the brain track. Really useful. If you're having weird effects with the ramp step components, random and things like this, double check your brain track and set the key manually if it's not detecting the key that you want. And this can change the key that it's detecting just based on you adding an additional chord or something. Say that you use, for example, an augmented or diminished chord where you're using a sharp or a flat, for example, that's outside of it. So if we, for example, if we go here, we can do a diminished or an augmented chord like this, and then this will, it won't be able to detect as well what the key is, so you can manually set it. Okay, so that's the brain track. Let's go to the external MIDI track. Okay, so I've done a little bit of setup here, and I've connected up an external synthesizer. Let me see if I can show you. So over here, I have a Behringer DeepMind 12, and I have connected it through, I've connected it to the MIDI out port. There's 4 ports here, and I've connected it to the MIDI out, and I've connected it to audio in. Okay, so the MIDI is going out through this cable here, right? And it's going all the way to the Behringer DeepMind 12, and then the audio from this is coming all the way back in and coming into this port here. Okay, so let me put this back and be able to show you what you can do when you set it up like this. Okay, so back in position. Now, if I go to this track here, I can send MIDI out. Let me turn on the Behringer to start with. And I can set up which channel it gets sent to. Now, I think I have this set up so that it's channel 14 that it's listening to. Now, I need to do a couple of things here. So this is sending MIDI out, and I can see that it's being detected on my synthesizer, but you can't hear anything. And that's because this external audio is not connected up. So let me show you this. We go to this external audio here. We have a whole bunch of sources. I'll come back to this in a little bit, but we need to change it to this one to start with and activate it. And if we go back to this, so this is coming from the DeepMind 12. And we can do things like change the bank. So if I go to bank 8 and then program 1, and change it to program 4. And we can change for example, the level of this. We can bring it down a little bit. Oh, and then we've got to go back. And we could change to another patch. Okay, so you get the idea. You can connect up an external device, you can send MIDI out. Now, a couple of things to set up, obviously. One, you've got to make sure the channel is receiving on whatever device you're sending it out to, and then you can send the bank and program information out of these. Now, and you can sequence this as normal, right? So let's say, and then we can say that it would last this long. Let's mute other things for a minute. Change this track tails to 2. Let's do this. And actually, all of the step components work as normal here. So let's put on this one a multiply step component. We could do, for example, we could take this off and we could transpose it, but up a fifth. And we could do this only every second time. Okay, so you get the idea. You can sequence things just exactly the same as normal. We can then also control various different parameters. If we go on to these three, M1 and 2, sorry, you can specify different CC values to stand. So you can press Shift and you'll set the CC value you want. So let's say, for example, I think 52, for example, and then we can modify it. After we hold Shift to set the CC, and we can modify the value. So this sounds like it's changing something to do with the envelope, for example. I don't know the CC values for this synth, I'm afraid. But you can set up a whole bank of these, right? So you can set it up on one, however many different CC values that you want. Well, this has definitely changed something tonally, which is nice. And again, the cool thing is that you can parameter lock this. So let's say that we have one. And we can do smoothing. So you can do all the same tricks that you can do with any other device. The external engine, and I'm going to show you this just now. So let's say I'm not using one of my instrument tracks, I can load up an external instrument on this. If you go into, if you go here and then we do Shift and M1 and then down to MIDI, and then we load this up, then we will see pretty much the same thing, right? And if I go up to 14 again, you can also send out CV and gate. Now, I don't have anything that I can set up easily to show you this at the moment. So what you can do, if this is not connected, then you can use this one to set what happens with this multi-jack out here. So you can set it to send audio, or you can put CV. Now, if you do CV and you connect up a stereo splitter, then you can send Trig and gate out of here into Eurorack gear. And it's exactly as you'd expect. Once you've done this, when you press a key, it will send the Trig, the CV. Again, this is based on note information. So you can, it'll take the note on gate information and send it out through CV, and you can also get it to send the pitch information as well. You can see it here, but I can't really show you that very easily at the moment. I've already kind of shown you external audio. Let's just make sure that we're able to, let's go, oh no, sorry. I need to turn this back and put it back to MIDI. So we're sending MIDI out again. And we go back to this one. So I've already shown you that you can get external audio through this. This one is the input, the input channel here. But so this is external audio, and we can change the level of this, right? Or turn it on and off as well. You can also overdrive it too. We can also get other effects on this as well. So you can select your input source, and I'm going to put in a little microphone that I've got here for my headset. So I've got a headset microphone, let me show you. So it looks like this, and it's got a little headset attached. Now the cool thing is that you can use this as an input source. If you go, this is the built-in microphone here, right? So we can get that sound from that. We can also do my headset. Now I'm going to turn off my other microphone, and hopefully you can hear this. Let's drive it a bit harder. Hello, 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 hello. Here we go. So we can do this, and on the input channel you can add all sorts of different things. So for example, I can do effect sends based on this. Hello, and some delay. Okay, so I can send audio in here. There's also a filter. Now it's a high pass and a low pass filter, and you can use it to clean up your audio in various different ways. So this is pretty useful. And then you also have an LFO, which you can use to affect various different things, like the panning, for example, and we can do a lot of, so you can see, hopefully you can hear that it's panning back and forwards, and anything else we can do. Volume here, hello, 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 and it's getting louder and quieter. So that is the headset microphone. You also have the built-in microphone as well. And you can say hello, 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 and tap. You can hear this hopefully. Then you also have USB audio, so you can send audio through USB from your computer and you have internal resample. Okay, so that is the external audio channel, and it comes in here. Very useful. Tape track. Now, the tape track is really interesting. It is a continuously recording buffer, at least when the sequencer is playing, it's a continuously recording buffer. And you can, either when it's stopped or not, if it has anything in the buffer, or you can do this live. And you have different parameters for it. So tape speed, and a multiplier for it. And the length of it as well. And you can sequence this, same as before. So the tape looper you can get some interesting effects with. And you can control what goes into the tape if you press on M2 or on the individual, let me see, go back to here for example, if we go on to menu 3 we can do it at the send level. So this is sending to tape, but if we go like this, then this track will no longer be sending to the tape. So for example, we could say, well, we don't want to send any of the drums to tape, right? And then if we go back in here, so you see when we play this back, there are no drums there, right? So you can hear them in the background, but there's no drums there. And of course, if we see this now, we can see that in parameter 1, the drums have been turned right down. And now we can hear that they're getting chopped up by the tape track. So again, this is quite a nice one. Often I'll do this, where I don't want the drums to go into the tape so that it keeps it, and you can hear the rhythm, and you want to mess up everything on top. And so you can change them. If you click down on the encoders, or encoder 1, sorry, then you can get the 5, 6, 7, and 8 instrument track, deal with the effect sends for those as well. You can also send the external audio track. If we go here, then if we go onto this one again, you can send it to the tape track, but by default it does not send. But you can get some cool effects with that. There's also a filter. So again, it's a high pass and low pass filter. And you can turn this on and off to filter out particular frequencies if you're getting something that you don't like. Maybe take a bit of the high end off that. So yeah, this is useful, and again you've got an LFO where you can alter some of the parameters, in particular the, I think you can do it with parameter 1 for example, which is the multiplier, and you can get some interesting effects. So that is the tape loop, and it's really nice for getting some live performance effects. Notes. Parameter locks and step components work on aux tracks. As I showed you with the MIDI track, you can do parameter locks. With the tape track, you can do parameter locks. They all work. You can do it just the same as you can with anything else. You can sequence on them, so don't forget that. This is, yeah, it's quite fun with tape on. So for example, if we want to go, let's say, if you combine these, and then if you do repeat, or about pulse, sorry, or hold, you can get some interesting effects because, let's send the drums again. So pulse can be quite fun with it, and you can get these kind of glitchy sounds, for example. If we take this off, and then we can just hear that. And it'll go out of sync, and you can get some craziness there. Punch-in effects can be tamed a little bit with step components. So now I have some punching effects here, but I've got them muted at the moment. But let's mute the tape track just now. See how we've got this little drum fill that's coming from this. Now we can do a trig component on this and only do it every second time. So if you get some crazy punching effects, you can control them a little bit with step components. Yeah, finally, I showed you, let's make a longer sequence here, and then we will sequence in So here we've got like a little chord progression that's going with the brain. Now we can say that we want to put this up by a third, and you could also do it with the step component. For example, it'll be, so this is it transposing properly as we wanted it to. Next time it won't do that, and it'll do the default. So you can see that you can change these in all sorts of different ways. Random tonality work very nicely on the brain track and with step components, so they're great fun. Okay, the next thing to mention is the effects tracks. So I've left these to last because we're going to go through the different effects that you have. You have 2 effect slots, FX1 and FX2, and you can load up different effects engine onto these. There are 5 effects. Is that right? Or is there? No, there's 6 effects. Sorry, that's a typo there. There are 6 effects. There are chorus, delay, distortion, LoFi, phaser, and reverb. When you're on these tracks, it'll play the last selected track. So if we go in here and we say this one here, and then we go back to the effect, it'll be there, right? And this means that we can play around with the delay, for example. The menu, I'll show you this right now because it's useful. If we can do at the send level directly from here. So we've got nice bit of delay here on our track 5. And then we can try and change the time, the size, bit of feedback. And show the amount of the dry signal you're sending through. So that is the parameters that you can alter, for example. So level 2, you can choose the send level for each of the different instrument tracks. M3, there is a high pass and low pass filter. In fact, you've got an LFO as well. You can alter some of these parameters. All of these parameters you can alter. So there's some useful tools there as well. Let's go through the different effects track. So to start with, let's make sure that we've only got, on channel 5, we've only got this one coming through. And we're going to load up chorus. So it shifts the pitch and the timing and creates a wider sound, and it's got a bunch of different parameters. Yeah, so we've got chorus there, it's quite nice. You've got the pitch modulation, you've got the depth, feedback, and then stereo. So that's chorus. Then we can do the next one up is delay. You can modify the size of the room, the time, the feedback, the wet dry mix. And of course we can do an LFO on this too. So we can say parameter 1. We can make a bit of cruisiness. So yeah, we can modulate those parameters and turn off the LFO there. So we've got the size, we've got the time, we've got feedback, and the wet dry mix as well. And we've got distortion as well, and it's nice distortion actually. So we've got the drive. We've got clipping. You can have a low cut filter and a high cut filter. Okay, the next one is LoFi, and it has rate, bits, quality, and drift. And I've got an LFO here, which sounded pretty cool there, but so you can totally destroy the sound basically. So this is a lot of fun. You can get a lot of different sounds with this. And then we'll go up the phaser. So the phaser is a 12-pole phaser that filters and reintroduces sound. And the parameters are the frequency and the depth, the rate, and feedback. Get some nice effects with this. It gets pretty gnarly though. So it's quite nice, the phaser effect. And then the last one is reverb, and I mean, let's go onto this one because it's already loaded on here. And we'll go to 2, and we'll say, let's put it right up. And we'll turn off this effect for now, this intros. It's got a really nice reverb, room size, mod, tone, and the wet dry mix. It's really nice, lush. So yeah, lovely reverb as well. Okay, some notes on effects. You can send effects 1 to effects 2, and this is really cool. This is lots of fun. So for example, let's say, the way to do this, if we go on to menu 3, it says no effects send. So let's send everything through to effect 2. And then you can do some cool things. So let's combine, for example, one of the interesting ones is reverb going into reverb. To make sure that we've got the send level is the same on both. Okay, or high on both. Let's just send them, whack them both through. You can hear that when you send it through one reverb then another, it starts to get a bit chaotic. Okay, so that's reverb and reverb. You can get something really lush. You can also do chorus into phaser, which I really like. I think this is fun. It sounds mad. Let's get rid of a bit of the feedback. And then so you can get these really cool weird drifting sounds with it. And then you can tame the madness maybe a bit with the EQ. But more on the EQ later. And the Master Saturator also is a distortion type effect, which you can add in over the top, but it applies to all audio in the whole device. Let's talk a little bit about project structure and how the projects are structured in the device in general. You have a project, which has project settings, a tempo, and then of course your history within this project. Inside that, you have 16 different tracks, right? 1 to 8 is your instrument tracks, then 9 to 16 are your auxiliary tracks. Per track, you have up to 9 patterns. Patterns save information about notes, parameters, locks, step components, how many bars there are, the preset that's loaded, tweaks your presets, and they can have up to 120 notes in a pattern, right? And you can independently set the pattern for each track. You can save that configuration of patterns into a scene, and then you can chain multiple scenes together to make a song. To understand this, to start playing around with this, we need to go into Arrange Mode, which we've not really touched so far. Now, let's go back and reload our project. So let's go to History, and we'll go to this one here and load. So we have our original little pattern that we made. If we go into Arrange Mode, when we see the current scene that we are on, by default, if you go from your instruments to this, by default it will show you your instrument track. So you can see 8 of them here, and you can select the different track and see the different pattern for it. These boxes are the patterns. If I press Arranger again, then you'll see your aux tracks, right? So you can see that, for example, this has dashed lines through it. I have muted, currently I've got muted the punch-in effects track. And the same with, I have patterns 1 and 2 and number 8 muted as well. Each track can have up to 9 patterns. You can make a new pattern by pressing New here, right? So for example, I could make a new one, and now I don't have the drum on it, and I can select between them using the white encoder. Okay, so I can load up these patterns, and I can turn it off. And I can have up to 9 of those per track. If I do up here, there's 9, right? There's the 9 different options I can have, and I can delete them by holding down delete. So there you go, and you can do that on a per track basis, right? So I can add up to 9 patterns. So I can delete a pattern like this, or I can clear a pattern. If it has notes in it, then I can't delete the last one, so I can just clear it. So I can select a pattern here. If I click down on the encoder, I can mute and unmute the track, but there's lots of ways to do this. If I hold Shift as well, I can mute and unmute tracks, and you can see that they get sort of grayed out when they're muted. So just the drums, just the synthesizer, just the bass. So, and you can also do this by holding down the instrument button and then picking which ones you want to have on. That's the fastest way to do it. And you can do the same thing with the aux tracks and bring back in the punch-in effects. So we get our little fill. So now let's say that I want to copy this. I'm going to copy the drum track and I make a new one. I'm just going to change it slightly. Maybe I'll take out the hi-hat, make 8th note hi-hats instead. For this one, I want to get rid of this step component, so it's a lot sort of straighter. And then we could go to this. It's got those 16th note hi-hats, and then that re-trigger. So I've got these different ones, and I can do the same again if I go to bass. If we hold down just this track, we can solo it. So we could make a new pattern here, and we could say and then we can change between them. Turn off record. We've got a few different patterns here now, right? And let's say, for example, we can start to set up our scenes. Okay, so scenes, they hold the pattern, mute information, and mix information as well, right? We'll get to the mixer in a little bit. So if I say here let's start off with our first scene. Let's say that we want just the synth to be in to start with. Let's just this one here. And we want that to be our first scene. And then So this is scene 1. You can see which scene's set here. We can change scene by pressing another number. So for example, here's scene 2. And in scene 2, well, maybe we want to have the synth and then the drums, for example. Maybe the bass as well, why not? Okay, so now we've got our scene 1 and scene 2 here. So scene 1. And then we want to bring in, and maybe we want on this scene we'll have the and then maybe we want to have in scene 3, we want to bring in the chords. Let's see, we want to keep this, get rid of this, and then bring in these chords. So that's scene 3, and we can go back. You can see that the speed of pattern 2, as it's going round and round, is much faster than the speed of pattern 3. And the reason for that is that the chords track has a different scale, right? It's got scale set to 2. It lasts twice as long. The length of the scene is dependent on the longest pattern. Now you can actually go beyond scene 3 if you press you can go up to 9, for example, right? But you can go beyond that by pressing 0 and then typing a number. So like we could say scene 13 or scene 18 or whatever we'd like. So you can really get lots and lots of different scenes. You'll notice that changing a scene happens instantly, and so it's kind of hard to time that yourself, but there is a workaround for this, and I'll talk about it now. In fact, we've got a few different scenes, right? 3 different scenes. If we press Shift and Arrange, we can go into song mode, and in song mode what we can do is we can basically type in a chain of scenes. So we can say we're going to have 4 of scene 1, and then we could say 4 scene 2, and then 2 scene 3, for example, and then back down to scene 1. Now if we do this, you can see that it's playing through, and each time it finishes, it goes on to the next one. We can move this cursor around and delete and add things in live as well. So this way we can build up a song. And of course we could do other things, bring in different things, make new scenes with and once it finishes it'll just loop back around. And the interesting thing is we've got actually multiple songs here, so we can go, let's delete this back, and we can say this is song 1, but we can save up to 10 songs. I think in the manual it says 9 songs, but actually it's up to 10. So these buttons down here will select between the songs. So you can have a different variation. So maybe in this one we want to just have song 2 of these, and then on to 3 for 2, and then on to 1, and then back to 2 or something like this. And as you can guess, it'll play through. And if we go to this one, it'll just carry on, and it's from the start. Okay, can also change where the playhead is, so you can queue up a change, right? I would wish that you also had an option that it wouldn't auto advance as well in song mode. This could be useful, right? So you can do this to make variations on your song. Some advice. Right, song mode is quite awkward to use. It just takes a little bit of getting used to working in this way, but it's very, very useful. There's no doubt about this. One thing that I would recommend when you're making your song, one thing you'll notice is if I go to scene 4, say, everything goes to goes to pattern 1. Now this is quite annoying because then everything will be on. One way you can get around this is you can make a pattern. You can make a project where by default you've already added in an extra pattern to everything. So for example, for all of these and all of these, you have one pattern loaded in. Now this means that you can then go and say, for example, go start adding things in on that track. Now so this is good, so that's scene 1. Now if I go to scene 2, nothing's loaded in, and I can just choose whichever one I want. Making a template project can be really good if you want to set it up and always use, say for example, your favorite drum samples on these 4 tracks here, and because obviously your mutes are based on track, so having them set up like that could be very useful for what you're doing. You can make a project to do this. You can't, as I showed you before, if you change scene, it automatically happens. But if you want to queue it up, then go into song mode, right? We've got one on here, and then we just do 2, and then we can delete out this one. And as soon as it gets to the end, it will queue up. Now if we clear all, it will stay on that pattern, which is nice. And then we can say, okay, back to this one, clear all, and then at the end of this one, it will go to 2. Clear all, 3. Clear all, 1. This can be very useful for queuing scene changes without having to time it perfectly. Okay, so next up we have mix mode, and it's dead straightforward, right? We can just change the levels on various different tracks. So if I'm on mix mode, if I hold down, this is a useful thing, you can use a solo, there's a solo shortcut, but we can also do things like change levels. There's the bass going in and out. We can change the panning. We can click down to mute this track. We can change panning left and right, and center it by clicking down. We've got effect sense, so reverb and delay. Turn this down, and of course we can select the track that we're on. And these are all, you can parameter lock all these as well. So we can go, so parameter locking that, and of course we can remove the parameter locks like this. If it gets too chaotic, we can record again. So we can remove that, and of course we can use our parameter component to be able to affect when they come on and off. So it's relatively straightforward. You can hold shift and to mute things like this, but again in this mode as well, just holding, so that will change out of it. So if you want to stay in it, you can hold, so if you're in this mode, if you hold this, then you'll change back to the instrument mode, right? So this shortcut isn't so useful there, but there's an additional one where we can press shift and then we can mute tracks and stay on the mixer, which very often is something that you would want to do. If you press mixer again, you'll get to the auxiliary tracks, and again you can change the levels of these, for example for the input or the tape track. So yeah, the mixer, all the options work for the instrument tracks, some of the options work for the auxiliary tracks, and you can switch between them, and you can tell that which one you're with because this will light up red as normal. So that is the basic mix mode, but there are some other options. If we go to M2, we've got this master EQ, we've got bass, we've got mids, and we've got high end, and this is our preset. So if we put this right up to the top, we can choose what we're going to set here. And you can sort of change in between them. You cannot parameter lock these. These ones are not parameter lockable. Then the next thing you've got is the Master Saturator, which is lovely. You can get really nice gnarly sounds using this. It's a nice addition as well. Very useful. I've used that a whole bunch, to be entirely honest. And then M4 for the master mix, and you can affect bring up the percussion or bring down the percussion. You can also do it with the melodic tracks. The way it figures this out is basically by default it just uses the drum sampler as the percussion track, and then everything else as the melodic tracks. There's also a compressor, equalize out the volume, and you can get get some nice sort of effects. And then there's the master level, right? So you can bring up the overall level of it. Okay, so that is the mix mode. This is, I'm just putting this up for your reference. You can pause it if you'd like to take a look at it. This is the signal flow diagram for the whole device, and you can see how things are added into the mixer. And then, of course, at the end of this, we've got this effects chain that we were talking about with the equalizer and the saturator. And then there's a compressor and a limiter, which you can't tune or tweak the properties of the limiter. So that is the mix mode there. Now, the next thing to talk about is sampling. So if you want to enter sample mode, then you just press the sample button here. Say I'm on a Synth Engine track. If I press this, this doesn't take a sample, so it will automatically record to a file. This one for the input source. And we can change the gain, and we can change the trigger level when it'll start recording. So let's boost up the gain a little bit more on this. Then we press record to record. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. So there we go, we can record, and that's saved to a file, and you can see the file name up here. It is P1G3, so it has your project name, and then it has the key of the sample. Now, so that's if you're on a synth track. If you're on a sample track, you can record directly to it. So I'll show you that. Let's start off with making a synth out of this. Let's go to Axis here, and we're going to go Shift M1, and we're going to load up the sample engine. So here's the sampler. Now you can see here we don't have a sample on this. If we press sample, it'll press key to sample. So let's do something. Wah. So you can hear that there's a lot of reverb. Let's turn off the reverb and delete. So we have a sample in there, as however good or bad you might think it is. We can start off by changing the start and the end point. Let's pitch up a bit, or change the octave, right. And then we've got a loop point as well, which is on by default. We can turn off the loop point. If we press shift, we can get another set of parameters. So for example, we could change the pitch. And you can do very fine adjustments as well by clicking down on this. You can change the direction of the sample. And we can normalize we can change the level as well. So we could crush it. And then the last one is the loop point. So we can turn off the loop to start with. So it'll be a one shot. We can also we can change the start and end point. So again, if we do not on the shift menu, we can find the loop point. So for example, here we can go. And we can also, there's like a fade in for this. It does a really good job of avoiding pop as well. If you go down to different pitches, so if you put it far away from the pitch of the sample as you record it, it'll get some sort of aliasing artifacts, but we can go to 1 to 4 is the start, the loop end, and the sample end. And then don't forget the shift menu, that'll be the direction. You can pitch it up and down, change the loop crossfade. You can turn it on and off the loop as well. You can adjust the volume as well of the overall sample. And then, of course, you can save this as a preset if you really like it. You press save, and then it'll save the sample and all the setting information where you've cut it and whatnot as a preset. Okay, so next up, we have the drum sampler. We can load that up by pressing Shift and M1, and we can go up to drum here. When we're on the drum, by default, if we're on drum, then there's no samples loaded, but it can hold 24 samples, and they can be up to 20 seconds long each. If we do this, so for example, we could maybe we could sample using the microphone, and then we just pick where we want to go, and then let's see if we can make something. And then, so this is our sample here, and if we go here, we can start to change the parameters. Now, they're different from the one shot. The volume is the same, and then maybe we want to pitch this down to make. So this is our, right, let's change our start and end points, which are these middle ones here. So there is no loop on these. So we could say that that is a kick, and then we could say we could record something else on this. So if we do something like that. So it's super quiet at the moment. Let's go back over and we will cut the start and the end. So again, encoders 2 and 3 to cut the start and the end. And let's increase the volume, hold shift. And now we've got a kind of almost hi-hatty sound. Let's record one more. So you could do vocal lines or anything like this, and you can load them all up in here. And again, save it as a preset, and it'll be your own little drum kit or whatever you like. You can also sample from other sources, right? So we could go here, and I'm going to sample from the audio in. For example, we could sample something here. Something from this is connect up to the DeepMind 12 again, and let's just we do a bit more gain. Oops. And again, this is all pitched up, so let's change the start and the end point. So we can do one shot and we can loop, we can pan it, and of course we could start to sequence this and do whatever we liked with it. Again, you can choose another empty one, and you can actually resample. So if I do so we can change the pitch of them with the octave plus and minus, which is why the sound was changing there before. I didn't realize that I had that on. So we can resample as well, right? And we could do something, mash it up and do something weird with it. But yeah, so lots of different audio sources. So that is the drum sampler, relatively straightforward. The next one is Multisampler, and Multisampler is, well, I don't know if it's a little bit more complicated. In some ways it's simpler. You can use this to sample an external instrument and then be able to have multiple samples across the range of the keyboard, so you don't get these aliasing effects. Now, the way it works is that you press your sample button. We're going to set it to external in, because again, DeepMind 12 for this one. And then let's just double check where we are. So I've got this is middle C selected here. Check the volume, it's pretty good. So there's our first sample, and again we could tidy this up, going here. We can choose a loop point, start and end. Or turn the looping off, if we like. Now, if you notice, if we go down, it starts to get quite bad aliasing, but let's say we just go down one octave more, and let's add a new sample in there. So one octave down. So that is the pitch down one. And this is on the DeepMind 12. So let's record it. And again, we can just tidy this up a little bit. put this here. We can turn the loop point off. So now, you can see it's using two samples here, right? One here, so everything down from that will use this sample, and then everything up. Now we can see that again it's starting to alias when we're getting up there, but we could sample again multiple times so that over the full length of the keyboard we have samples for each of them, and then it'll make a really nice effect. You can accurately sample an instrument. So this is really cool. If you're wanting to, you can do this to set the zones. You can have up to 24 samples, so you can really accurately recreate another synthesizer, and it's very powerful. I mean, you can get an awful lot of different sounds into your device using this technique. It would be nice if there was like an auto sampling mode where you can set up that it'll run through and just send MIDI to a device and record each of them and stack them up. It'd be a bit easier to do. Maybe Teenage Engineering could add that in the future, but it's not that much hassle, right, to do this. And of course, if you've already got multi-sampled instruments, you can load them in as well. Okay, so one other thing about this. So let's load back up. I'm going to load just back up the sampler engine. And if you're on this, right, and this is empty at the moment, you can actually just directly load a sample into it. So if you do Shift and Sample, you can pick. So for example, if I go down to User here, so this is a multi-sample that I've got of or samples that all came from the Pocket Operator robot. So I could just load this up here, and I could do all sorts of things like. And of course, I could load it up to a drum sample as well using exactly the same method. So Shift and then Sample to open up your sample folder, and you can have a look through different packs and things like this. That's the sample folder. You can load up different things. It looks at the sample name to determine the pitch. So this is useful when you're naming your files to import them onto the device, so you can tell it what the pitch is. It will actually look at this here. Okay, so next up we've got COM mode, which is how the device basically speaks to the outside world. You've got things like Bluetooth MIDI settings, you've got the multi-jack out, which is the second port on the side here. I can't show this very well just now, but it's the second port on this where you can do set it to send all sorts of things. So for example, you can get to send MIDI, but you can also get it to send things like sync, various different types of sync, CV from the CV track, and audio. You can get audio out and then feed it back in and audio in. A couple of interesting things to mention. So it has Bluetooth MIDI. So here's the OPZ. I'm going to turn it on, and hopefully it can get loud enough that you can hear it. I think you should be able to hear it. Right, now I can connect this via Bluetooth MIDI to this device. So if I have, for example, if I see my devices here, I've already linked it. Let's forget this just now and go back. And so I can press on the back of this. Obviously this isn't about the OPZ, but this is how you do it on this until it flashes. And then you go to devices and it can see it. And then you click pair and it's connected. Now, if I go to, so this is MIDI is being sent, right? That's connected. Now, let's show this here. Devices, if I go to this device menu, I can set, so this is, for example, both of them are taking notes, and let's say that I don't want this to send notes to me, so this could be confusing if it did. Notes in and out, so let's say that we just want to send it out. So now if we go over to their MIDI track here, hopefully you can hear this. So yeah, you've got Bluetooth MIDI, you can get it to send clock information, right, as well. Sorry, it's going to be a big mess of sound. Bluetooth MIDI is great, it's so convenient, and the latency is low enough that for controlling another device, it's not a big deal. You can advertise the Bluetooth to connect to the device. So if you turn this on, you can see it flashing here, it will advertise as Bluetooth. And you can connect, say, a computer or something to it. Okay, so that's that. Encoder 3, like I said, can change the multi-jack out, and you can get MIDI CV, different types of sync and audio. And you can't change the multi-jack out when something's plugged into it, which makes sense. You can also turn charge on and off. So if we do on and off, and if you have any interference when you're recording, any buzzing or hum or whatnot, it might be because it's charging over this port at the same time. There's also a whole bunch of system settings in here. If we press system, there's all sorts of things. So for example, the brightness of the screen, there's the brightness of the LEDs, there's country options. So I think it's world, Japan, and US. I'm not entirely sure what this does, if maybe it's to do with metrics or settings or something. You can have, there's this option power off, which is very handy. By default, this will power off instantly as soon as you flip this switch. But if you're worried about flipping that accidentally while you're performing, you can change this to delayed. And then when I do this, it will say, oh, you've turned this off, press COM for install, or you see it's not turned off, right? I can have this playing, nothing has happened, and then you can stop it from happening like that. Whereas if I did this normally, it would just turn the whole device off. So that's a useful feature. Have a look through and see the different things. You can set the velocity profile. I've changed this to soft because I preferred it. The default MIDI settings, clock, pitch bend, your battery level. This is the only way to see the battery level at the moment. I wish there was a shortcut for this, but there's not currently. And then as well, all legal information. So take a look through those COM settings. And these are for the whole device. They're not at the project level. The other thing you can do is you can use the OPXY, as a generic MIDI controller. So you can send note information, and these will send CC information, things like this. So you can just use it as a MIDI controller. To get out of this, which is not straightforward, you have to press Shift, and then if you press COM, it will turn it off. So Control, and you can choose what channel it's sending across by holding down Shift. You can say whether the knobs are absolute values or whether you want them to be relative CC values, so it changes them, or whether it sets it to a defined amount. You can also disable plus and minus to change the octave if you need that for your device. And again, Shift and COM to turn it off again. So that's turn it to a MIDI controller. The last one is MTP. So if we have this connected to a computer over USB, you can send files using MTP, right? Now, what happened when I did this? Okay, so when you open MTP mode, then the file browser, on Windows, this will just work automatically. On Mac, you need the Field Kit app, which I think you can download from the App Store. I don't have, so I can't tell you this. Now, what it'll do is if you've got it connected or you connect with it, you can go into the device and you can start to see everything that's here. There's this very handy file which tells you how to import stuff in the formats that things should be, so have a look in that. But you can also just immediately click and drag all these to wherever folder, or copy and paste them to back up everything on your device. You can organize your sample folder. So for example, with users, you can rename all of your files here, and you can make as well, you can find your presets. These are the presets that I've made, and you can do things like set the category of them. There's a particular naming convention that you can use, and it tells you this in the how to import. If we go into this document here, if we look at the how to import file, then it has a whole bunch of information, and it tells you about things like how you can add categories to your presets and things like this. Now, there's various different restrictions with the way that folders are nested and things like this. It does have an impact, so careful about how you do this. So yeah, you can. This is how you get all your presets out, how you can export it and back up the project. Now, when you're finished doing this, basically just press eject, and then MTP mode will be off. And it's really robust. It seems to work quite nicely. It was initially quite slow to transfer stuff, but now it's a lot faster. And I think that they fixed that with basically one of the first firmware updates. Okay, so that is MTP mode, how you access things. You can delete and organize presets and add things, relatively straightforward. Okay, so finally, how do you update the firmware of the device? It's being updated relatively frequently at the moment. mainly bug fixes and things like this. I imagine lots of features in the future. To do that, there are two ways. One, you can use TE boot mode. See the manual for that. You can see the relevant section here. It's 24.1. The other way to do it is to use Teenage Engineering's web-based MIDI updater. So I'm going to show you how to do it with this. There is a new update that's out, and I can show you how to do this just now. So what you do is you go to downloads on their page, and then if we go to OPXY, you can see that there is this update available here, and we can click MIDI updater, and our device is connected. Now it automatically detected our device, right? You can see that this is the OPXY here, and then we can click update OPXY, and everything will happen automatically, and it happens over MIDI sysx. Now you can see the devices went into firmware update mode. It's doing things. One thing I'll point out is that you need to have Web MIDI activated for the website, and the updater tool I think tells you how to do that if you don't have it active, but it's a browser setting that you'll probably need to activate. And be aware with Web MIDI, it's not necessarily you don't want to just accept it blindly, because any MIDI devices that are connected to your device, it could interact with, and that might not be a positive thing. That might not be something that you want. So use it on trusted websites like the Teenage Engineering one. So it's just downloaded, and then it's decrypting it, and then I imagine it'll do a checksum, and then it'll be installed on the device, and then it automatically restarts, and that's it finished. Done. Off it goes. Right, so it has updated, and the device is restarted, and it says that it's been successfully updated. So we could check this, in fact, because one of the changes they've made is that, yes, external is now called MIDI, so it has updated successfully. Okay, so that's how to do it. So we're getting close to the end now, and this is the MIDI implementation chart. So if you've got an external MIDI controller, you can control the OPXY and control things like track mutes and things like this, which can be useful to free up your hands to perform in other ways. And you can connect over Bluetooth MIDI again, or you can connect up MIDI in, for example, from another device. Right. Okay, everyone. That is us. We have reached the end of this video manual. I appreciate that it's thank you if you have watched to this point. I hope you found it useful. I hope you've learned something. If you have, then please consider liking and subscribing. Leave a comment if you have any questions. If you have feedback or suggestions, please write down below, and I'll get back to you. I appreciate any comments, any feedback that you might have. And consider sharing the video if you found it useful.